Chapter 584. After the Empress finished grooming, the two of them sat facing each other in the bedroom and smoked e-cigarettes. A large amount of smoke came out of their mouths and enveloped both of them. The reason why the Empress liked e-cigarettes was because they were sweet. Furthermore, they were cold. The two of them ate one mouthful after another as if they were eating snacks. The entire hall was filled with a fruity and milky fragrance. From time to time, the Empress would raise her head to look outside through the glass. She was tempted to go out for a walk, but after thinking about the hot weather outside, she gave up on this idea and stayed in the bedroom peacefully. When Xanger arrived, she could only see their silhouettes at the door. This wasn't the first time she saw such a scene, so she wasn't surprised. After estimating that it was about time, Rinpoche bade farewell and went to check on other arrangements. He only strolled to Xingqing Palace Hall in the evening with his hands behind his back. Whether it was the Empress's birthday celebration or the year-end banquet, they were all held here. Although it was called a palace hall, it was actually a huge palace hall. However, only the main hall was used for banquets and banquets. The other halls had been abandoned for a long time. Even though there were people cleaning them from time to time, they were still a little old. When Rinpoche entered the main hall, many people were looking up and studying the light belts above their heads. Rinpoche could now carry 1,200 kilograms of items at a time, so it was much easier to carry items. During this period of time, he had brought many light belts to install in the main hall. At this moment, the light belts flickered in the air, making the entire main hall look like a fairy tale world. Rinpoche's entrance attracted the attention of some people. After nodding in acknowledgement, he found his seat and began to wait. Occasionally he would chat with Feng Ho. Feng Ho was very interested in the wine and springs that Rinpoche and the Zhang family had bet on. In particular, the springs that could be made into crossbows would be a great weapon. Unfortunately, such springs couldn't be made in this world yet. Whether it was the materials or the craftsmanship, it couldn't be achieved. As for the wine, Rinpoche was also preparing to build his own winery for the imperial family. After all, the market for hard liquor in this world was huge and the profits were huge. Furthermore, it wasn't suitable to expand in a short period of time. Especially in Dayo, the grain production hadn't reached the point where it could be used to produce wine. Rinpoche was prepared to bring out cotton and textile craftsmanship. After talking to Feng Ho for a while, Guihong also joined in. Rinpoche and a few ministers from the Ministry of Works formed a small circle and whispered to each other, attracting the attention of many people. Unknowingly, Tong Xinye appeared behind them and listened for a long time. He couldn't help but ask, "Principal Rin, do you want to take up a position in the Ministry of Works? It's a pity that you didn't come to the Ministry of Works with your talent." Sir Tong. Rinpoche turned around and greeted him. "As for going to the Ministry of Works, forget it." After another 15 minutes, Shiqing, Hongwu, Shiwanya, and the others arrived one after another. After they sat down, the Empress, who was dressed in a bright red Han costume, slowly entered the hall with Qing Yuan and Hong Luan. After greeting each other, the Empress took her seat in the seat of honor before slowly sitting down. Following which, the maids outside the hall brought in the dishes one after another. Everyone's gaze immediately fell on Rinpoche's face. The dishes from last year's birthday celebration had left a deep impression on everyone. Many people didn't really have a taste of it that time. As soon as the dishes were served, everyone immediately thought of him. They wanted to see something from his face so that they could be mentally prepared. Rinpoche's good-natured smile made everyone feel more at ease. This year they were all on the same side, so it should be the same as in previous years, right? However, as soon as the first dish was served, everyone's face immediately turned black. There was a whole blood sausage coiled together on a plate. Of course, Rinpoche knew what it was, but the others didn't. Seeing this, they lost their appetite. When the second dish was served, everyone had the urge to draw their knives and hack Rinpoche. There was a neatly roasted sheep's penis and 2 sheep's eggs on the plate. How were they supposed to eat this thing? Were they supposed to let people chew on it? However, this thing didn't taste right no matter how they ate it. Just the thought of everyone in the hall eating the sheep's penis in an orderly manner was too beautiful. Many people craned their necks to look at the Empress and realized that her dishes were completely different from theirs. They immediately stared at Rinpoche with murderous expressions. The third dish was soup. It was a copper bowl with a bat the size of 2 palms swimming in it. This bat soup immediately made everyone lose their appetite. The fourth dish looked pretty good and smelled very fragrant. Everyone looked at the food in the bowl with uncertainty. The food in the bowl seemed to be edible, right? In fact, this dish was considered a famous dish. When Rinpoche saw it for the first time, he couldn't eat it. However, after being persuaded by others to eat it, He realized that it tasted pretty good. The fifth dish, a bowl of raw beef mince. The sixth dish, a crooked roasted water snake. Seeing the sixth dish, everyone finally felt that there was at least one dish that was edible this year. Then they continued to stare at Ren Baqin with murderous eyes. Are you trying to pick a fight with us? Are you not done yet? Ren Baqin felt rather wronged. This year he only provided 3 dishes on the menu, which were the braised meat, roasted sheep's penis, and blood sausage. The other dishes, such as the bat soup, raw beef mince, and roasted water snake, were all developed by the Imperial Kitchen. He didn't know if the Imperial Kitchen had chosen the wrong skill, but they actually developed several types of dark cuisine. Usually, the dishes made by the Imperial Kitchen were eaten by the Empress and Ren Baqin. Even if they developed something, there was no one to share it with. Now that there were so many people present at the Empress's birthday celebration, they brought out all their tricks. This time it really didn't have much to do with him. At most, it was only 50% related. The Empress looked at everyone's expressions, looked at the food on the table, and then looked at her own. She then ignored them. In any case, the food that she ate didn't seem to have any problems. Following that was the inscription. It wasn't too innovative and was just a routine. Ren Baqin took the opportunity to look around the hall. As expected, Li Fu didn't come. In any case, Li Fu was the world's most powerful expert, and it was reasonable to invite him. He didn't know if Li Fu really didn't like this kind of environment, or if he didn't want to see Qin Chuan, Tong Jinye, Tu Wan, and the others. He directly rejected the invitation. Just now he sent someone to invite him again, but it seemed that he didn't come. After the Empress drank the first cup of wine, a group of young Jing tribe girls entered the hall and danced. These young Jing tribe girls all had silver bells hanging on their waists. As they danced, the silver bells rang continuously and were extremely pleasing to the ear. Their dance was also different from the wildness of the Aboriginal girls. It was filled with a gentle beauty and had a different kind of flavor. At least, Ren Baqin quite liked this kind of dance. It looked good whether they wore clothes or not. Chapter 585. The jade egg that Hong Wu presented last year could be considered a rare treasure. The 100 Beauties painting was also considered pretty good. Naturally, there was also the mirror that Ren Baqin presented. Ren Baqin didn't know if there would be another gift like last year. Many people looked at Hong Wu first. According to the usual practice, Hong Wu would present his gift first. Some people also looked at Ren Baqin. He had a lot of strange things and they didn't know what he could take out. The general-in-chief who supports the nation, Hong Wu, presents 100 sets of armor and 2,000 sabers. The gift wasn't as expensive as last year's, but it wasn't cheap either. 100 sets of armor were worth 10,000 gold, and 2,000 sabers were not cheap either. This gift was worthy of Hong Wu's status. It was just that the things that Hong Wu took out last year were too shocking, so it was inevitable that everyone had a little hope in their hearts. However, Hong Wu had been stationed at the border for a year and couldn't move at all. All his thoughts were on Great Xia and he didn't have the energy to search for rare treasures for the Empress. Great Elder Shi Qing presents 3 pieces of Mongolian beast skin and 2 stalks of green sunflower. Junior Elder Zhikohai presents 3 tails of cloud crystals. Everyone turned their heads to take a look. 3 tails of cloud crystals were priceless. They didn't expect that Zhikohai's gift this year would be much more valuable than Hong Wu's and Shi Qing's. However, Zhikohai's expression didn't change in the slightest, and the crowd couldn't see anything from his expression. Next were the congratulatory gifts from the 6 ministers, Shi Wanya and Li Qianqiu. Basically, they were all rare treasures, similar in value to the items Shi Qing had taken out. Most of the items sent were directly stored in the warehouse. Only 1 or 2 items were left for display. The other rare treasures were displayed in front of the hall before being sent to the inner treasury. The principal of the Black Bamboo Academy, Ren Baqin, presents the Heaven's Proud Beauty painting. Following the voice, 2 people carrying a 6-meter-tall, 3-meter-wide painting appeared in front of the hall. In the painting, a woman in red stood on a high peak with her hands behind her back, looking down calmly. Everyone could see the cold and threatening aura coming from the woman in the painting. This painting naturally depicted the Empress. The heavenly beauty was also referring to the Empress. This was the proper meaning. However, the most surprising thing was that the Empress in the painting looked like a real person. It was impossible to tell that it was a painting. People had always said that it was lifelike, but after seeing this painting, everyone knew what it meant. It wasn't drawn, it was printed. Everyone exclaimed in admiration. They didn't know how Ren Baqin did it. At a glance, the Empress could tell that the painting was a photograph. This made her slightly disappointed. She originally thought that he would be able to come up with something that she liked, but she didn't expect that it would just be an enlarged photograph. Although the angle of the photo was very good and she was very beautiful in the photo, she could naturally fool others. However, she had seen a lot of people on Earth. Even she would use her phone to take photos. However, when she thought about how Rinpoche had been preparing for the bet with the Zhang family and how he had been busy decorating the palace, she decided to put this matter aside for now. Your Majesty, there's more to this painting than that. Rinpoche stood up and smiled. Oh. The Empress's eyes lit up. The rest of the people also revealed looks of interest as they carefully examined the painting, trying to figure out the mystery behind it. Rinpoche gestured for someone to bring in the painting. The painting, which was 6 meters tall, was even taller than the door of the palace hall. They had to lift it halfway to bring it into the palace hall. As the painting got closer, everyone began to realize that there were thin lines on the painting that divided it into lattices. This was a painting that was pieced together by the lattices. When the painting passed in front of everyone exclaimed when they saw the back of the painting. This made the people in front curious. What exactly did they see? Rinpoche asked someone to hold the painting 4 meters in front of the Empress and slowly turned it around. When she saw the north side of the painting, even the Empress revealed a look of surprise. Her eyes sparkled like a lake that was blown by the wind. Behind the painting were palm-sized photos of the Empress. Every frown, every smile and every frown were included. Countless palm-sized photos were all of the Empress. Rinpoche chuckled. On the back of this painting were 1,200 photos of the Empress, and on the front was a picture of the Empress that was formed by 1,200 jigsaw puzzles. The back of each photo was a jigsaw puzzle piece. More importantly, the 1,200 photographs in this painting were arranged in chronological order. Almost all of the Empress's changes over the past year could be seen in them. Even a blind person would be able to tell that the closer to the bottom of the painting, the gentler the Empress's expression became, and the coldness from her body became less. Even a blind person could see these changes. In the eyes of others, this painting could already be said to be priceless. Even though the Empress knew that these were photos, she also felt that Rinpoche had put in a lot of thought into it. She had spent almost all her time on these photos, as if they represented her life over the past year. This feeling was very wonderful. In addition, this painting also hides a secret, Rinpoche continued. After hearing what he said, everyone was curious. This painting could already be said to be exquisite, and they didn't know what other secrets were hidden in it. I have hidden all my life's knowledge in this painting. After this, I will divide this painting into 1,200 pieces and distribute them throughout Dayo and even the Yun nation so that everyone in the world can see your Majesty's face. If someone collects these 1,200 pieces, they will be able to find the location where I have hidden all my life's knowledge and obtain it. Rinpoche winked at the Empress at the end of his speech. The Empress didn't know whether to laugh or cry, and the little bit of emotion she felt earlier had completely disappeared. Did you find a place to hide a set of mathematics, physics, and chemistry textbooks and then let the whole world search for them? Let's not talk about the possibility of someone collecting all 1,200 pieces. If someone really collected all 1,200 pieces and found the mathematics, physics, and chemistry textbooks, they would probably beat you to death. However, except for the Empress, everyone else found it very interesting. Even though Rinpoche's martial arts weren't good, everyone could see his other abilities. They also recognized him. If someone could really learn all of Rinpoche's knowledge, he might really be able to make a career out of it. It was just a pity for this exquisite painting. I have also prepared some things that your Majesty should like. After the ceremony, your Majesty and all the officials can follow me out to see the things that I have prepared. For the rest of the time, everyone didn't have the mood to think about what else Rinpoche had prepared. They had to admit that Rinpoche was really clever. At least, no one could have imagined that he could actually do this with that painting. After the ceremony, everyone followed Rinpoche to the open space behind Xingqing Palace Hall and saw that the ground was filled with all kinds of things. Once the Empress saw the things on the ground, she knew what Rinpoche had prepared. Your Majesty, it's your turn to light it. Rinpoche took a torch from a guard and handed it to the Empress. He then pointed to a thin line on the ground. The Empress lit the fuse on the ground. A spark quickly rolled on the ground and then scattered to dozens of fireworks. Bang! Fireworks rose into the sky, blooming with colorful lights in the sky. The entire Lan city was alarmed by the fireworks at this moment. Countless people were alarmed by the colorful flowers that suddenly bloomed in the sky. Look, it's flowers. What beautiful flowers. It's on top of the palace. One by one, People walked out of their houses and looked up at the fireworks that appeared in the sky of Dayo for the first time. The fireworks also lit up everyone's faces. Everyone was amazed by the beauty of the fireworks. Balls of light soared up from the palace and bloomed in the sky. In the palace, in addition to the fireworks that soared into the sky, there were also many fireworks on the ground. It was magnificent and magnificent, stunning everyone. Qing Yuan and Hong Luan followed behind the empress and looked at the fireworks in the courtyard and the fireworks in the sky with ripples in their eyes. The empress was completely immersed in this sea of fireworks. Chapter 586. The empress's birthday celebration this time was sensational. The commoners didn't know anything about the palace, but they saw the blooming fireworks in the sky. This was the first time everyone had experienced such beauty. Many people in the city were looking up at the flowers in the night sky, admiring their beauty. Until the next day, many people were still discussing what the flowers that appeared in the palace were. However, another explosive piece of news came out very quickly. Ren Baqin, the principal of the Black Bamboo Academy, had hidden everything he had learned in a painting. He then divided the painting into 1,200 pieces and sent them out of the city. As long as someone found these 1,200 paintings, they would be able to find out what Principal Ren had learned in them. Do you want fame, wealth, and status? Do you want to know the mysteries of this world? If you want, I can give them to you. Go and find them. I have placed everything there. This sentence was heard by many people. The most interesting part was the phrase, the mysteries of this world, which made many people daydream. However, the ones who were most interested weren't the Aboriginals but the Zhang family. When this news came out, Zhang Junjing immediately inquired about the whereabouts of the paintings. However, this was Dayo and not the Yun nation. The Zhang family was powerless even if they wanted to. Next was the Jing tribe, who had a higher degree of recognition toward Ren Baqin. After coming out, they heard many rumors about Ren Baqin and were very interested in everything he said. It was a pity that the Jing tribe only had influence in Tianjin Basin. As for the Aboriginals, their minds were still focused on their fists. However, each of the 1,200 paintings was a portrait of His Majesty, and many people were tempted by them. It was every Aboriginal's wish to obtain a portrait of the Empress as a treasure. As a result, Ren Baqin's joke really caused quite a commotion. On the second day of class, 3 idiots immediately asked for leave. The world is so big and I want to see. Oh no, I want to find the treasure map. Then these 3 idiots were hung on the flagpole by Ren Baqin. Teacher, what was that in the sky last night? Many people looked at Ren Baqin with sparkling eyes, especially those female students. Even Tong Lan was the same. Beautiful things were more attractive to women. Fireworks, fireworks, fireworks. You will learn about it in the future. Ren Baqin smiled as he stood on the podium. When the students heard this, they immediately became excited. This was much more interesting than mechanics and optics. Even many male students wanted to find a girl and then put such fireworks in front of her. Would anyone be able to reject them? By the way, I will bring a new teacher to you tomorrow. Be mentally prepared, Ren Baqin said before the class ended. A new teacher? Everyone was astonished. Yes, new teacher, you will like it. Alright, school is over. Ren Baqin strolled back home. The robot company had promised to deliver the goods in 3 months, but it took a full 8 months before they finally delivered the goods the last time he went back. If they still didn't deliver the goods, Ren Baqin was prepared to show them why the flowers were so red. However, after receiving the goods, Ren Baqin felt that his 8 months of waiting hadn't been in vain. However, he still needed to bring back a lot of fireworks, so the robot was temporarily placed in the room. When he returned to Dayo the next morning, not only was there a robot by his side but there was also a flying motorcycle. Over the past 2 years, Earth's technology had progressed very quickly. It could be said that after the Industrial Revolution, the progress of technology was getting faster and faster. Recently, it had already reached the point where a person who had left society for a few years would find himself completely obsolete and unable to understand many things around him. 2 years ago there were only trials of driverless buses, but this year they could already be seen in many places. Identity cards had become cell phones. The bank had also become an unmanned bank, completely intelligent. The speed of change was so fast that even Ren Baqin found it a little strange. The same was true for flying motorcycles. The earliest flying motorcycles could only fly for 40 minutes and were at a height of 4 to 5 meters. The latest model that Ren Baqin had gotten his hands on could already fly for 2 hours and was at a height of 8 meters. Ren Baqin couldn't help but get one to play with. After returning to Dayo, Ren Baqin rode the flying motorcycle above the palace and headed toward the Empress's quarters. When the flying motorcycle rose into the sky, the guards of Pingle Park were shocked. However, they knew that it was Rinpoche and didn't have any extreme reactions. Soon after, they were dumbfounded as they watched Rinpoche fly away in the sky. However, not long after Rinpoche flew, he heard someone shouting in front of him, "Who are you? Come down." Soon after, a figure with a bright sword slashed at him. This scene almost scared him to death, and he hurriedly shouted loudly, finally letting the other party recognize his identity. However, it was easy to draw the sword but difficult to retract it. The other party finally managed to retract the sword in midair, but he couldn't stabilize his body and collided with Rinpoche. After a series of chaotic sounds, the flying motorcycle crashed to the ground. Rinpoche and Xanja collided into each other and fell to the ground in a daze. Xanja jumped out of Rinpoche's arms in panic. Soon after, she calmed down and glared at Rinpoche. "Sir Rin, next time you do such strange things, at least let me know first. I can retract the sword this time, but I can't retract it every time." Rinpoche lay on the ground and felt pain all over his body as if it had fallen apart. He couldn't even feel the warm and fragrant body in his arms at all. He wanted to cry but had no tears. He was riding the flying motorcycle and was almost struck down by someone. This time he finally understood Green Bead's feelings when she was shot down by the Empress. Flying was dangerous and one had to be cautious when taking off. "I say, can't you take a good look before you strike someone? It's only a few meters high and at such a slow speed. You can't possibly not see it, right?" Rinpoche complained. Xanja stood in front of Rinpoche. Her expression changed a few times before she snorted and said, "I can't even see things 10 steps away. Therefore, Sir Rin should be more careful in the future." "Are you nearsighted?" Rinpoche was surprised. He didn't expect nearsightedness to exist in this world. Even though he hadn't interacted much with Xanja in the past, they had met quite a few times in the palace. This was the first time he knew that she had a vision problem. What was even more surprising was that she could actually become the commander of the palace guards with a vision problem. Xanja snorted and walked away with a black face. Even though she didn't know what Rinpoche was talking about, she could keenly sense that he was talking about her vision problem. After all, Rinpoche said the word vision. Rinpoche lay on the ground and thought about Tingyu. Even a blind person could become the third most powerful expert in the world. It wasn't surprising that Xanja became the commander of the palace guards. After Xanja left, Rinpoche was sent back to Pingle Park dejectedly by the guards. Not long after, the Empress received the news and came over to see him. She wanted to laugh when she saw that his head was wrapped in bandages. She then said with a smile, "Xanja's vision isn't very good. Next time, let her know if there's anything and this won't happen. She should be able to get a pair of myopia glasses, right?" Rinpoche asked thoughtfully. "I don't really understand. There's no such thing as myopia in Dayo. However, you can bring her over to see if there's a solution." The Empress cared a lot about this loyal and devoted commander of the palace guards. It would be great if Xanja could regain her vision. Chapter 587. After taking the medicine, the bandage on Rinpoche's head could finally be removed. However, his arm was still in a splint. Even if he were to use the ointment from this world, it would still take a few days to recover from the fracture. He then asked someone to carry the robot's box to the academy. Although this would damage his prestige as a great teacher, it couldn't be helped. When Rinpoche arrived, all the students were there discussing the new teacher who would be coming today and why Yagüe was late. This was the first time since the establishment of the academy that he was late. Many people guessed that it had something to do with the new teacher. When Rinpoche arrived with a splint on his arm, all the students looked a little strange. Rinpoche was in the palace every day, and with his status, no one dared to offend him. How could his arm be broken? Needless to say, it was most likely done by Her Majesty. Rinpoche immediately became the image of a victim of domestic violence in the eyes of all the students. Well, it was delightful and satisfying. "Open the box." Rinpoche asked the guard to open the box, revealing a white and blue armored Gundam. It was about 2 meters tall and weighed about 160 kilograms, which was about the same as an ordinary person. The weight was mainly in the core, and the outside was only a layer of steel frame and iron sheet. Rinpoche pressed the back of the robot's head, and it emitted a sound similar to a computer case. Then its eyes turned blue. "You will be their teacher in the future. Get to know them," Rinpoche said. "My name is Gundam." An electronically synthesized voice came from the robot's body, and it slowly stood up from its original position of hugging its knees. "What a beautiful armor! many students immediately exclaimed. Teacher, is it human? Some people were puzzled because the Gundam's movements were very strange and stiff. No matter how they looked at it, it wasn't because of the layer of armor. Although these students didn't have the concept of a robot, they could easily see that it didn't have a trace of vitality. Whether it's human or not, it's your teacher and can answer your questions. Therefore, you need to respect it as a teacher, Rinpoche said as he stood on the podium. Now you can ask some questions that you have encountered in the process of learning and let it answer them. After hearing Rinpoche's words, everyone suddenly realized that this thing really didn't seem to be human. But what exactly was this iron armor? He didn't give a lecture for half a day, allowing the students to ask Gowda any question they wanted. Gowda used the information stored in the database to answer them. Rinpoche listened for a while and had a rough idea of what was going on. Without being able to connect to the internet, the Gundam lost a large portion of its learning ability. Its answers were very stiff and were completely based on the information it had stored beforehand. There were textbooks and some articles from other sources. But the good thing was that it could also give some examples to illustrate the situation. Therefore, although it wasn't flexible enough, it was enough for now. The Gundam didn't move for the entire morning. If it only answered questions, it wouldn't consume too much battery. By the time school ended, it still had 30% battery left. That morning, many students were very excited but also very puzzled. Such a novel teacher would naturally make them feel excited. As for their doubts, they realized that the Gundam's communication with them didn't feel intelligent at all. It was very inflexible, but it was able to answer many questions. This made many students puzzled. When school was over, they still circled around the Gundam, reaching out to touch its outer shell. Go back, all of you. This is your teacher. You must respect him. Is it right for each of you to touch it? Do you think you are going to a brothel? Rinpoche's face darkened as he chased everyone back. He got someone to move the Gundam to another room. Just as Rinpoche entered, Li Fu followed him in a flash. He looked at the Gundam curiously and asked, "What is this thing?" "It can be considered as an auxiliary tool," Rinpoche replied after thinking for a while. "It's interesting. This thing can actually speak and even answer questions. If it wasn't for the fact that it doesn't have any signs of life, I would have thought that it was some kind of species. However, to be able to make such a thing, it can be considered a superb workmanship." Li Fu clicked his tongue in admiration. This thing couldn't even fool the students, let alone the world's #1 expert, Li Fu. "I'm just curious, how exactly does this thing speak and answer questions?" Li Fu circled around the Gundam a few times and reached out with his dirty big hands to touch its body. "Senior, if you continue to stay in Dayo, you will know how to do it in the future." Rinpoche laughed. "Senior, when are you going to teach me that godly rod? Where is the heaven that you promised me?" "This kid is full of lies," Li Fu immediately spat. "This thing can't be made just like that, right? I'm already preparing it." "Just wait for a few months," Rinpoche said. "In that case I will wait. If you continue to make such a mess every day, I will find trouble with you." Li Fu thought about it and touched the Gundam again before leaving with a look of admiration on his face. Rinpoche pondered for a while after Li Fu left. With his strength he could bring a hot air balloon back. However, it wasn't completely impossible to make a hot air balloon in this world. If it was possible, he would rather make things that could be made in this world. After all, this was the only way for technology to progress little by little. If even things like hot air balloons were to be brought over from Earth, there wouldn't be much meaning. The cloth was relatively easy to make as long as it was sturdy enough. In any case, he wasn't going to make this hot air balloon fly into outer space. As long as it could make Li Fu go around in the sky, it would be fine. The main problem was the airtightness of the hot air balloon. This required him to find a rubber-like substance in this world and apply a layer of it on the cloth to achieve such an effect. Rinpoche immediately went to the Ministry of Works to look for Tong Jinye and asked him to help find something that was similar to rubber. Over the next few days, even though there wasn't much progress on the rubber aspect, the bunch of stupid students at the academy finally made a decent steam engine. Although it was a relatively primitive steam engine that was used to lift water, this was already a breakthrough. Furthermore, this was a reciprocating power machine that converted the energy of steam into mechanical work. Its appearance in this world could be said to be an important step forward. Rinpoche immediately summoned the Empress and the big shots of the Imperial Court to Black Bamboo Academy to see the results of these students. When they heard that the Empress and the big shots of the Imperial Court would be coming, many of the students were so excited that their faces turned red. One had to know that other than Tong Lan and Shurgan, the rest were commoners and people who weren't valued by their families. Before entering the academy, they could already be considered as people who had been abandoned. When had they ever been valued so highly? Not only would the Empress be coming, but the big shots of the imperial court would also be coming. One couldn't blame them for putting the Empress first. It was simply too easy for Renbachin to invite the Empress. On the contrary, the arrival of the big shots of the imperial court made them feel that they were valued even more. Chapter 588. Straighten your backs. Even though you are only students of the academy and don't have an official position, you are already the pioneers of this world. You still don't know what this steam engine will bring. However, after a few years or more, you will be remembered in the history of this world. Each and every one of you will be remembered in the history books by future generations. Your greatness is second only to mine, and my greatness is second only to Her Majesty. Renbachin said resolutely to the students in front of him. The carriage of the Empress and the ministers was only 10 minutes away from the academy. However, he saw that the students were feeling apprehensive after the excitement and didn't know if this steam engine would be appreciated by those big shots. After all, the function of this steam engine was to lift water, and Tong Lan could lift water much faster than the steam engine. However, Renbachin understood the value and significance of the steam engine better than all of them. The Industrial Revolution began on Earth after the invention of the steam engine. Even though the technology of this world hadn't reached this stage, the steam engine was only a toy for the people of the academy. However, under his impetus, the Industrial Revolution would inevitably come. The students subconsciously puffed out their chests when they heard what he said, but burst out laughing when they heard the last sentence. Even though your talents, in the traditional view of the Aboriginals, aren't at the junior high level and can even be classified as trash. However, you have to remember that there are many fists as big as a casserole and they are everywhere. There aren't many people who can use their brains. Those who use their brains govern others, and those who use their strength govern others, Renbachin continued. Teacher, do you think it's mental or physical? Shurgan asked. What do you think? Of course it's mental. Renbachin glanced at him and saw the smirk on his face. What about Her Majesty? It's also mental. Then why is teacher the one who governs others? Tong Lan asked with glowing eyes. It looked like they would jeer if he didn't give a good answer. Of course it's because Her Majesty is wise and brave. Renbachin grinned. He couldn't possibly say that the key was that the Empress's fists were bigger. No matter where, force was very useful. The group of people laughed when they heard this. How do we compare to the scholars of Great Xia? A student asked. What the teacher teaches is different from what they teach. There are many types of scholars in Great Xia. Some of them are frivolous while some of them govern the people and rule the world. As for you, you are the ones who push the world forward at a rapid pace and scare everyone off. When you open your eyes every day you will see a different world. Renbachin rubbed his chin and thought about the scholars in ancient China. On one hand it was politics. On the other hand it was technology. No matter from which angle he looked at it, he felt that technology was more useful, especially for a world. Only technology could make this world different. Sir Ren is so ambitious. This old man wants to see what a new world looks like when I open my eyes every day. Tong Jinya's voice could be heard from outside the wall. He didn't know what kind of ears he had to be able to hear from so far away. Renbachin waved his hand at the students, put his hands behind his back, and went to the entrance of the academy to welcome everyone. He saw Tong Jinya and Qin Xuan riding their mounts in front of him and looking at each other in disdain. He really didn't know how these two, the Minister of Works and the Minister of War, behaved as if they hated each other for stealing their wives. Behind them was the Empress's carriage. The other court officials were behind the Empress. As for Exanger and the other bodyguards, they were left far behind. Thinking about it, this group of people didn't need protection from others. It was already good enough that they didn't collect protection fees from others. Other than Li Fu, anyone who saw such a group of Cardinal Heaven experts would feel their scalp go numb. What good stuff do you have for us to see today? Tong Jinya winked when he saw Renbachin from afar. Qin Xuan also nodded as a form of greeting. Greetings, Your Majesty. Greetings, sirs. The Empress moved and appeared in front of the steps of the academy. She raised her head to look at the signboard of the academy and the surrounding walls. She rarely came here. The last time she was here, the walls were made of red bricks. Now there were many green vines climbing up the walls and the red bricks, making them look much better. Let us see your results, the Empress said to Renbachin. Although she didn't really understand the steam engine, she had heard Renbachin talk about its importance during their daily chats. It could be said to be the beginning of modern industry on Earth. As a result, she was looking forward to seeing this steam engine. "Your Majesty, sirs, please?" Rinpoche glanced at the crowd. Shi Qing and the others were among them. Many of them had unwelcome children in the academy, and they wanted to see what these children had learned over the past 9 months. The so-called academy had always been a courtyard and a few houses, and it was still the same even now. Although the layer of vines made the academy look less simple and crude, it still looked like a primary school in the mountains to Rinpoche. It could be said to be the simplest academy. The students in the courtyard were all gone. Rinpoche led everyone to the backyard and saw a small pond with dozens of students standing near a strange thing. That thing was mainly made up of a large iron bucket, a wooden barrel, a wooden box, a mess of pipes and wooden poles, and a huge wheel. "Is this what you made in a month?" Tong Jingye moved closer to Rinpoche and whispered. However, his whisper was almost the same as shouting at the top of his lungs, and everyone heard him. Tong Lan's face immediately turned black. In any case, they took more than a month to make this thing, but they were actually ridiculed by their grandfather. "It's not me, it's them," Rinpoche said, which made everyone's faces turn even darker. Just now, they said that they were pioneers and would be remembered in history. How could they cast them aside so quickly? They used to call her Xiao Tian Tian, and now they were calling her Madame Niu? However, don't underestimate the steam engine. The appearance of the steam engine here represents the beginning of a new era, Rinpoche said. "Demonstrate it," the Empress said faintly. "Let them experience it." Rinpoche turned his head and said to Tonglan and the others. Previously, everyone was already prepared and filled the big iron bucket with water. When Rinpoche said to start, they started a fire under the bucket to boil the water. Immediately, smoke billowed in the courtyard. "Are they preparing to take a bath?" Tong Jingye grinned. "Sir Tong, you should just watch quietly." Rinpoche shook his head. The others were also waiting to see what tricks they could play. Chapter 589. Hey, it's moving. Many people looked at the rotating flywheel and clicked their tongues. Obviously, no one moved those things, but the wooden rods and wheels actually moved on their own. As the water temperature began to approach the boiling point, the rods and flywheel rotated faster and faster, and the exhaust pipe of the cylinder began to emit red steam. The flywheel also began to coil the rope and lift the bucket that was previously placed in the pond. When it reached a certain height, the students would pour the water out and throw it back into the pond, repeating the process. This thing is actually moving on its own. Many ministers walked over to watch and found it interesting. After all, it didn't require manpower and could move on its own, which was quite novel. However, after more than 10 minutes of novelty, everyone lost interest. "But what's the use of this?" Someone began to raise doubts. Tong Jingye immediately shouted, "You made this toy after more than a month?" Although it looked quite novel, if they were to carry water, it would be much faster for them to do it themselves. Even the water wheel that you made previously is more useful than this. "That's right. It looks interesting, but it's not very useful." The others were also making comments. They were somewhat astonished that Rinpoche had created such a thing. This didn't really match his status. The things that Rinpoche made in the past were quite surprising. How did he make such a thing with such great fanfare this time and even invited everyone to see it? "Old man, that's why I said that you have a long beard but short of knowledge. Is this a matter of a toy?" Qin Chuan immediately mocked. However, his words also ridiculed a group of people. Many of the officials present glared at him as there were many bald and bearded officials present. "What do you understand now?" Tong Jingye snorted. Qin Chuan had the attitude of opposing anything that Tong Jingye agreed with and vice versa. "This toy is quite interesting. The most important thing is that it was made by so many people. Previously, these students were just drinking and fooling around, but now they can make something like this. Not bad, not bad." Tong Jingye almost burst out laughing after hearing Qin Chuan's words. Rinpoche's face immediately turned black. This old man might as well not have said anything. He turned to look at the group of students and saw that many of them looked gloomy. Obviously, the words of Qin Chuan and Tong Jingye had dealt a huge blow to the students who had finally made their first steam engine after more than a month. As for the others, most of their thoughts were similar to Tong Jingye's. Originally, when these students entered the school, they said that he was going to teach them the principles of all things in the world. Everyone was looking forward to it. But from the looks of it now, it was just SOSO. When Rinpoche saw everyone's reaction, he was displeased. After thinking for a while, he realized his mistake. The role of the steam engine was very important, but these people did not understand it at all. Without the knowledge of the later generations, how could they understand what the steam engine represented? You can only see that this thing can carry water, but this is just a prototype. In fact, this thing can do a lot of things. For example, you don't need a horned cow to drag a truck. Isn't that still a toy? We have countless horned cows in Dayo. If we can use them to pull the chariot, why do we need to use this thing? Tang Xingye really couldn't understand why Rinpoche wanted to do this. One had to know that the solar furnace he had created in the past had played a huge role as it could directly smelt iron ores. There was also well salt, which allowed Dayo to produce its own salt. Cement and red bricks also played a big role. Nowadays, the new steel-making furnaces outside the city were all made of cement and red bricks. They could also be used to build the city walls and houses. Compared to cutting rocks in the past, it saved a lot of manpower. But now he really couldn't see any use for this thing. Not only him but the others also deeply agreed with what he said. Only the old fox, Shi Qing, looked at Rinpoche and gave him an unfathomable smile. The biggest role of the steam engine isn't just limited to one place, but it represents a new source of power. It can replace human and animal power. Whether it was smelting, mining, or transporting goods, they originally required a lot of human and animal power to achieve. On the other hand, the steam engine can reduce human and material power to the minimum and increase speed to a higher level. This is the true meaning of the steam engine. For example, with the steam engine we can develop a train. This thing can transport goods and people. Its speed is several times faster than the horned cows, and the load it can carry isn't something that the horned cows can compare to. One train can carry goods that can be pulled by hundreds or thousands of horned cows. How much manpower will be needed to pull goods from hundreds or thousands of horned cows? How much will the journey cost? How long will it take to reach the protectorate of the Northeast from here? As long as we improve the steam engine and create a train, it can travel day and night without stopping. Originally, it would take half a month to deliver goods, but now it will only take 3 days. If we mobilize rations and troops during wartime, what kind of advantage will this be? Rinpoche said with a black face. He was actually looked down upon by this old man. He was actually looked down upon by a group of primitive people. This was simply unbearable. Is it like what you said? Tang Xingye asked suspiciously. Rinpoche gritted his teeth and wanted to give this old man a kick. Have I ever lied before? You always lie. Tang Xingye replied without hesitation. When have I ever lied? That solar furnace and other things, which of them didn't achieve the effect that I said? Rinpoche's eyes widened and he really wanted to kick Tang Xingye's crotch. Old man, do you know that this is slander? Previously you said that you would invite me to Yenyun restaurant. Tang Xingye stroked his beard with a look that said, you lied to me. The Empress's face turned green as she sent him flying with a kick. She then looked at Rinpoche with an unfriendly look. Qin Chuan grinned and laughed heartily. He was happy to see that old man in trouble. I really don't like to go to brothels, but he insisted on dragging me there. I had no choice but to brush him off. This is called a white lie. Rinpoche had a look of grievance on his face. The Empress glared at him and said, when will you be able to realize those things that you said? After all, you can't see anything from this. She had some understanding of the train that Rinpoche mentioned, but the others couldn't imagine it at all. Only by making it for everyone to see would they change their minds. If it's fast, we can make a small steam train in 1 or 2 months. After we succeed, we can enlarge it and make a real train, Rinpoche said after thinking for a while. It wasn't difficult to make a small steam locomotive. As long as the steam engine was modified and the flywheel driven by the connecting rod was replaced by the train wheels, it would be done. It could be said that it was very easy for him to make it, but it would take some time for the students to do it. However, this kind of thing had to be done by the students so that they could grow. Therefore, Rinpoche's goal was to first modify the steam engine into a small locomotive that could run. Then he would enlarge it according to the scale. In this way, after making the steam engine and the locomotive, the students would have a considerable understanding of the steam engine and physics. In the future, they would be able to learn or do other things much faster. In that case, I will wait to see all of you come up with the thing that you mentioned. The Empress nodded. Following which, she looked at the students who looked a little sad and said, do it well. The future of Dayo depends on all of you. After hearing what the Empress said, many of the officials were a little surprised. One had to know that these words weren't said casually. They didn't expect the Empress to value these things so much that she actually said, the future of Dayo depends on all of you. In their hearts, the future of Dayo was still in the hands of the talented children of the various families. Chapter 590. I heard that you have something that looks like a human and is wrapped in iron. Where is it? Let me take a look. Tang Xingye stayed behind and whispered to Rinpoche. He wasn't interested in the steam engine, but he was very interested in the robot from the academy. He had heard Tong Lan talk about it many times. "That's Teacher Gauda from the academy," Rinpoche said with a black face. Rinpoche said with a black face. In any case, the steam engine created by his own student was of great significance to him. However, the others didn't think much of it. This made him feel a little embarrassed. At this moment he especially disliked the two old fellows, Tong Jinya and Qin Chuan. "Where is it? Even if it's a teacher, I still want to take a look." Tong Jinya laughed. "He's been in seclusion recently and won't be receiving guests." Rinpoche decisively refused. "Just to take a look. You have quite a lot of good stuff except for that toy." Tong Jinya recalled what Tong Lan said before and felt like a cat was scratching his heart. However, Rinpoche's face darkened even more after hearing that last sentence. "I already said that I won't be receiving guests. You want to see him? Wait for next time." Rinpoche chased Tong Jinya out. He turned around and went back to one of the rooms, only to see Li Fu touching the Gauda like a pervert who had seen a beauty. These days, Li Fu would come and touch it every day, which made Rinpoche feel disgusted. When he returned to the backyard, many students were cooling and inspecting the steam engine. "Stop what you're doing." Rinpoche stood nearby and said. Everyone immediately put down what they were doing and listened to him. "Did you hear what was said just now?" Rinpoche asked. "Her Majesty said that the future of Dayo depends on us." Du Laolu couldn't stop laughing. "Do you really believe in polite words?" Rinpoche snorted with a straight face. "Don't you have any shame? Her Majesty never says polite words." Du Laolu rolled his eyes. "What can these things you make be used for? To fetch water?" Rinpoche sneered. "Didn't you hear what the other officials said?" The faces of all the students, including Tong Lan, darkened when they heard this. The steam engine, which they had painstakingly learned for a long time and spent more than a month to make, was belittled as a toy. No one could accept it. Unwilling? You want to be praised and admired? You want to show them how powerful you are? Do you really want them to think that what you're doing is amazing? Do you want to achieve this? Rinpoche looked at everyone. "Yes." Someone said in a scattered voice. "Me too. After all, you are my students. What you have learned is what I have imparted to you. If you are being looked down upon, it means that I am being looked down upon as well," Rinpoche said unhurriedly. "The knowledge of the steam engine is just the beginning. It represents a new power source. The next step is to transform the steam engine into something else, such as the train that I mentioned before. A train can pull hundreds of thousands of tons of goods. Furthermore, its speed was at least 3 times that of a horse carriage. As long as you can make something like this, no one will dare to look down on you." After Rinpoche finished speaking, everyone started to use their fingers to calculate how many tons were. Thanks to Rinpoche's mathematics class, these students could finally understand addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. However, they were shocked when they were done with the calculations. 1 ton of goods was 2,000 jin, so 1,000 tons of goods was 2 million jin. The load of a horse carriage was usually 3,000 to 5,000 jin. In other words, the train that Rinpoche mentioned could at least carry hundreds of horse carriages. More importantly, hundreds of horse carriages would consume a lot of rations. This was because the grass in some places wasn't suitable for livestock to eat and would cause stomach problems. Ordinary weeds could only prevent livestock from starving to death, but they lacked strength. Otherwise, the forkhorn cows wouldn't have the strength to carry goods for long distances. For example, baby ass. The Aboriginals would often break baby ass into pieces and mix them with fine grass for the forkhorn cows to eat. Therefore, when hundreds of horse carriages carried goods, there would be at least a dozen horse carriages carrying fodder and other things. A train could save this trouble. Many students had a better understanding of the function of neatness through the production of the steam engine. If they made a train, the ministers that came today would definitely change their opinions. After all, these students were still children. After being instigated by Rinpoche, they quickly became enemies. Even Tong Lan gritted her teeth and prepared to teach Tong Jinya a lesson. "Go back and think about how to improve this steam engine. I can give you some hints on connecting rods, changing the direction of the force and flywheels," Rinpoche said. "You can also go and ask Teacher Gauda. Should know." After Rinpoche finished speaking, he strolled away. The rest of the students ran to ask Gauda about the train. Half a day later, a cry of alarm came from the room. "Tong Lan, you broke Teacher Gauda. I just wanted to take a look. Who knew that I would dismantle it? What's inside? Don't pull me. I can just install it later." "There's really no one inside. I've been wondering if there's a person or something else hiding inside." Du Lao's exclamation could be heard. Are you stupid? This is obviously lifeless. However, it's really strange that it can speak without any life. Ah, Shirgan, you broke another piece. Tonglan was the one who broke it. Since it's already broken, I might as well study it. Yagüe will kill all of you tomorrow. I'll install it later. He doesn't know who did it, so keep your mouth shut. If anyone leaks the news, I'll let you know what a punching bag's fist looks like. Tonglan waved her small fist in the room and said fiercely, "We'll share blessings and misfortunes. Don't you know what kind of person Yagüe is? If this matter is leaked, you won't be able to escape either. Everyone will be out of luck." Shirgan was smarter than Tonglan and immediately pulled everyone into the war chariot. When Rinpochen came the next day, his face darkened as soon as he entered the room. He saw that the outer shell of Gouda had obviously been tampered with and then forcibly stuffed in. Rinpochen touched it and those pieces of outer shell fell off. All the mechanical parts inside were exposed, and some of the wiring had been pulled off and randomly tied in knots. Clang. Rinpochen wanted to see what they did to Gouda, but the moment he touched it, Gouda's arm fell off and almost hit his foot. Teacher broke Teacher Gouda. A little Lolita's cry of surprise came from outside the door. Tonglan stood at the door with her mouth slightly open and a shocked expression on her face. She was even pointing at Rinpochen. What happened? What happened? A group of people rushed to the door and stuck their heads out. Are you guys itching for a beating? Rinpochen put on a fake smile. This group of bastards even learned how to frame others? Speak, who did it? Whoosh. A group of people stretched out their fingers and pointed at him in unison. Rinpochen's face darkened. You guys won't shed tears until you see the coffin. Someone hang them on the flagpole. I'm going to shoot them for 50 minutes today. Chapter 591. Great Xia. Ever since they were defeated half a year ago, everyone in Great Xia was shaken. Even though they knew that the Aboriginals were good at fighting, they were still defeated by 50,000 soldiers after preparing for a long time. This was the first time in decades that the Aboriginals suffered such a huge defeat. Not to mention that the winged cavalry and Licentio's troops even plundered several cities within Great Xia's borders, causing a large region in the south to be in a state of panic. After the winged cavalry left, everyone in Great Xia felt an indescribable anger. Among the commoners, there was a surge of emotions, especially among the scholars. However, after half a year, de Xia did not take any action. This caused many people to be extremely disappointed, and they turned their attention to the imperial court. However, it wasn't that no one knew of the imperial court's current predicament, but even more people still directed their resentment towards the imperial court. After all, they had never been plundered by the barbarians in their hinterland. First, they suffered a great defeat. Then, the enemy troops ran amok in their territory, and they could do nothing about it. For the arrogant Great Xia, it was like rubbing their faces against the ground. Every day you say that this is not the right time. You can't even help me with such a small matter. You can't even come up with a solution. What use do I have for you? Emperor Xia's roar rang out in the Grand Xia's conference hall. The guards outside the hall subconsciously shrank their necks. Over the past half year, the Xia Emperor had often been enraged, and this had become the norm. Almost every few days, someone in the palace would be beaten to death for angering the Xia Emperor. At the same time, ever since he had coughed up blood and fainted twice, his physical condition had worsened. The Xia Emperor, who originally only had a few hundred hairs, now had more than half of his hair turned white. His face was haggard and his eyes were sunken in. Your Majesty, the imperial court is heavily taxed, and many places are already complaining about it. We can't increase taxes anymore. If they didn't raise taxes, it would be difficult to gather military rations and armaments. Moreover, the recruitment and training of new soldiers would take a long time. They wouldn't be able to move south for at least 2 years. Currently, the barbarians have the Yun Nation and the Qin Nation on the outside and Tianjin Basin on the inside. We won't be able to pacify the situation in a short period of time, so this is the best time for us to recuperate. After 2 years we will be able to wipe them out in one fell swoop. An old man said calmly. He was already used to the emperor's frequent outbursts, so he was not afraid. He only sighed in his heart. The emperor, who could be considered valiant in the past, could not help but become like this as he grew older. Although outsiders did not know, but seeing the changes in the past 6 months, he felt that the emperor was becoming more and more muddle-headed. Fortunately, the crown prince was still valiant. After His Majesty passed away, the crown prince would be able to shoulder the overall situation. Looking at His Majesty's body, it would only take a few years. Wait, wait, wait. Every day you all say that you want to wait. How can I continue waiting? Do you think I don't know what the people are saying about me? And you, Prime Minister? Xia Bailong snorted heavily. His face had turned red and his eyes were bloodshot. Thinking of the news that had been sent back, he almost went crazy. Your Majesty, calm down first. It's not good for your body to be so angry. After vomiting blood twice and fainting, Xia Bailong had fainted a few more times during this half a year. Everyone had no choice but to take care of the emperor's body carefully. Many things were hidden from him, but how could they hide it from him? Especially the revenge against Dayo, which had become a thorn in his heart. Your Majesty, those are just people with ulterior motives. If you get angry you will fall into their trap, Qi Mingtang, who was known as the Prime Minister, said faintly. Xia Bailong snorted heavily again before saying, nowadays all sorts of monsters have emerged. Do they really think that Great Xia is doomed after just one defeat? Have you found out anything? Their organization is very strict. They caught some people and committed suicide by poisoning them. However, this subject has recently found some clues. After a few more days, we will most likely be able to find the person who is using these sinister tricks. Another middle-aged man said. This person's appearance was heroic, his face was white, and he had a long beard. He gave off a dignified feeling. I will give you another month. No matter what, you must find out who exactly is stirring up trouble. Xia Bailong said. Then he covered his head with his hands. After throwing a tantrum he immediately felt a splitting headache. At this moment in the palace, a eunuch was walking to a certain place. Seeing that there was no one around, he dashed into the woods and found a small cylinder from a hidden place. There was a square box tied to the cylinder. After tapping on the box a few times, a countdown appeared on it. After doing all this he stuffed the cylinder and box back to their original places, walked out of the hidden place and went straight to the next place. Previously, it took him 2 months to send these things to the palace in batches and hide them in various places. Now it was finally time to use them. He didn't know what these strange things were used for. However, he knew that something earth-shattering would definitely happen 8 hours later. All along, his mission had been for this moment. At the thought of this, his eyes seemed to glow. There were 5 other eunuchs and maids who did the same thing as him. 4 hours later, 2 of them changed their clothes according to the prearranged route and left the palace while hiding under a cart that was transporting meat to the palace. An hour later, another 3 people left using different methods. Only the last person was a maid who didn't have an outstanding appearance, but her eyes were extremely bright. She was unforgettable. She sat quietly in the courtyard, waiting to witness everything that was about to happen. Qinglian, I'm afraid that you will be scolded if Her Highness discovers you like this. A maid who passed by reminded her immediately when she saw her. In this cruel palace, many people didn't want to see this maid, who didn't fight for anything and only did her own thing. Let her be scolded. Qinglian smiled and combed her hair. Her smile was exceptionally bright. You. That maid was dumbfounded. She didn't understand what was wrong with her. Have you lost your mind? Hurry up and leave. If you don't feel well, go back to your room and rest. If that person calls you, I will help you. Thank you, elder sister Ling Yu. Qinglian smiled again. However, I will be leaving in a while. So, it's better not to have anything to do with me. If someone asks, just tell them directly. Leave? Where can you go? You're not thinking of committing suicide, are you? Are you crazy? Her Highness treats you well. Although there isn't much freedom in the palace, you have enough to eat and wear, and the work isn't heavy. Why can't you get over it? That maid was shocked. Qinglian's smile froze. Did I say that I wanted to commit suicide? Aren't you imagining things too much? However, he still smiled and kindly reminded her, something big might happen in the palace in a while. Elder sister, you have to protect yourself. As he spoke, the cylinders hidden in secret places all over the palace suddenly exploded. Bang! Explosions sounded one after another. What's that sound? Someone go and take a look. At the same time, countless guards and maids rushed to the place where the explosion had just occurred. After running a few steps, they smelled a suffocating smell. One by one, they stood rooted to the ground and violently vomited as if they had been hit in the head by a sledgehammer. Some maids directly fell to the ground and fainted. This smell, which could only be found in the heavens and rarely in the mortal world, permeated the entire palace. Emperor Xia, who had just drunk a bowl of medicine and looked slightly better, was in his room when he heard the noise coming from outside. Before he could reprimand them, the smell entered the room through the window and into his nose. Chapter 592. Qing Lian screamed like a girl who had been molested, but she felt that she was in a worse state than being molested. However, she was rubbing her skin hard at this moment, wishing that she could rub off a layer of skin. Thinking of the encounter in the Great Xia Dynasty's palace that day, she felt that she was a complete tragedy. She wanted to see what would happen in the palace and see the chaos there, but when it happened she wished that she was never there. At that time she even suspected that she would die from the stench. Fortunately, the palace was also in chaos at that time, and she managed to escape. However, she tragically discovered that the stench on her body couldn't be washed away no matter how hard she tried. She was constantly smelling the stench on her body, which almost drove her crazy. Haha, I didn't expect that Xia Bailong would end up like this. He died from the stench? This way of dying is really strange. He is the only emperor of the Great Xia Dynasty, and his name will definitely go down in history. A man's laughter suddenly came from outside the courtyard, and his voice was extremely cheerful. Hearing that voice, her ears twitched and her face immediately turned pale. Sword. Qing Lian's face turned pale, and she grabbed her clothes to cover herself with one hand. She raised her other hand, and a white light pierced through the roof and fell into her hand. It was a 3-foot-long long sword. The blade was densely covered in fish scale-like patterns, and a red ribbon hung from the hilt. In the next second she turned into a white light and rushed out of the house, shouting in the air, "Su Qing, you bastard, give me your life!" Su Qing was shocked by her sword and quickly dodged. When the sword fell, everything in front of him was split into two. An old man next to him was shocked, and he stopped Qing Lian and said angrily, "What are you doing?" At this moment, Qing Lian's clothes were drenched by the water droplets on her body, and her hair was also wet. She looked like a beauty coming out of a bath. Although Qing Lian wasn't extremely beautiful, her eyes were extremely bright and spirited, and her temperament was outstanding. Although she looked angry, she was also extremely attractive. However, the old man and Su Qing smelled the stench that filled the air with her appearance, and their faces immediately turned green. "Don't stop me, I'm going to kill that bastard Su Qing. Why didn't you tell me?" Qing Lian gritted her teeth and drew her sword. "You can't blame me. Who would have thought that you wouldn't leave?" Su Qing ran off. It wasn't that he was afraid of Qing Lian, but the smell was simply too smelly. Even the old man subconsciously took 3 steps back. When Qing Lian saw their reactions, she became even angrier. She gritted her teeth and chased after Su Qing. After a long time, no one knew what Su Qing said, but Qing Lian let out a mournful cry and said, "Renbaqian, I won't let you off." Naturally, Renbaqian didn't know that he was being targeted. At this moment he was looking at Zhang Junjing with a kind face. "How is it? Is the name list ready?" "Sir Ren, it's done." At this moment, Zhang Junjing had a calm and smiling expression on his face. It seemed like he had thought things through. With both hands, he respectfully handed over a stack of paper that was filled with words. In fact, he had already thought it through. Since they wanted to take root in Deyo, it wouldn't be a bad thing for them to take advantage of Renbaqian. Since the Zhang family lost to Renbaqian in a few areas that they were extremely good at, then Renbaqian did indeed have some outstanding aspects. Furthermore, Renbaqian won these 3 competitions, causing a stir in the Zhang family. Many people quarreled endlessly over this matter. In particular, many of the old craftsmen in the Zhang family were in disbelief and wanted to see how good Renbaqian was. For these old craftsmen, a skill was more attractive than anything else, especially when it surpassed them in a few areas that the Zhang family was extremely good at. This made many of the old craftsmen want to see what kind of person Renbaqian was. Among them, even Zhang Junjing had to address the person with the highest status as uncle. His status in the family was even higher than Zhang Junjing's. It was precisely because of this that Zhang Junjing was relieved and handed over the name list. As for how many of the names on the list represented in the Zhang family, only a few people in the Zhang family knew. Renbaqian took the paper and looked at it. He saw that it was densely packed with small words. At a glance he could tell that there were quite a lot of them. "How many people are there?" Renbaqian raised his head and asked. "Sir Ren, the Zhang family has a total of more than 5,900 people, and their names are all on this list." Zhang Junjing cupped his fists. "How many craftsmen are there?" "There are more than 3,400 craftsmen and 2,000 people in other jobs. Not only that, but many of the elders in the family also have disciples who aren't related by blood. Although these disciples aren't on the list, they can also serve Deyo if the opportunity is right. The number of these disciples isn't less than the number of craftsmen," Zhang Junjing answered. Renbaqian looked down at the thick stack of paper in his hand again. There were 3,400 craftsmen. Including those disciples, there were at least 7,000 to 8,000 people. For the impoverished Dayo, 7,000 to 8,000 craftsmen could be said to be a huge sum of money. If he had 7,000 to 8,000 skilled craftsmen under him, many things would be much easier to do. Sir, our Zhang family has a big business and it won't be easy to leave the Yin nation, Zhang Junjing said again. Ren Baqian nodded. After all, there were so many people and many of them were famous craftsmen. It wouldn't be easy for all of them to run away at once. However, it didn't matter because the Yun nation wouldn't exist in the future. This was due to the lack of talents in Dayo, as well as the Aboriginals' lack of ambition and their habit of snatching without occupying. Up until now, they still hadn't realized that the Aboriginals weren't just going to snatch the Yun nation, but to swallow the entire Yun nation. What other requests do you have? Ren Baqian asked after thinking for a while. I want you to give our Zhang family a future, Zhang Junqi immediately said solemnly. This was the most important thing. Don't worry, Ren Baqian said faintly. As long as your Zhang family does a good job, I can guarantee that you will have a place in the future. Thank you very much, sir. Zhang Junjing cupped his hands. Your Zhang family members don't have to withdraw in a hurry. Those who are still in the cities that have been conquered can withdraw first. I will give you a token and they can travel with it without any trouble. Protector Z from the Protectorate of the Northeast will also arrange for people to escort them. As for the rest, stay where you are and wait for my news, Ren Baqian said. However, in the chaos of war, it's inevitable that there will be casualties. I will take care of this matter. You can rest assured. After sending Zhang Junjing off, Ren Baqian called for Zuoleng and gave him the stack of papers. He asked Zuoleng to find someone to copy it and then send someone to investigate. With the Jing tribe, it would be much easier to investigate in the Yun nation. Ren Baqian then looked for the Empress and suggested that Zidonglai send more prisoners of war back to open mines and repair roads. He had mentioned this before, but Zidonglai wasn't in the mood to do so due to the urgency of the war at the front line. Now that Zidonglai had conquered nearly 10 cities in the Yun nation, it was time to raise the issue. It was always right to build roads if one wanted to get rich. In addition, there were various materials from the Yun nation that Dayo lacked. This included, but wasn't limited to, various metals such as iron and aluminum. For this reason, Ren Baqian proposed to mobilize militias from the various cities to the Yun nation and transport all kinds of looted materials back to replenish Dayo. After their discussion, the Empress held a meeting with the ministers the next day and gave Zidonglai an order. Soon after, the Aboriginals' offensive at the front line began to change. In the past they mainly killed, but later on they started to leave some alive. Although they often couldn't hold back and only a few people survived after a battle, this was a signal. At the same time, the various cities in Dayo began to transmit information. Batches of militias were issued with weapons, walked out of the cities and gathered in the northeast. At this time, Ren Baqian received an extremely incredible piece of news. The Emperor of Great Xia Baichong had actually died from the stench. The news was sent by Su Qin. After reading this secret letter, Ren Baqian's expression suddenly became extremely strange. He then delivered this secret letter to the Empress, who was also dumbfounded after reading it. Ren Baqian, on the other hand, carefully admired this rare expression of the Empress. Chapter 593. Sister, the Emperor is dead. In a Taoist temple, a 16 or 17-year-old Taoist nun jumped into the room and shouted. In the room there was a woman dressed in Taoist robes. She looked like a fairy who had descended to the mortal world and was practicing calligraphy. Her gaze froze when she heard the shout. Such a big thing actually happened. The woman in the room muttered to herself and gently put the brush aside. Guess how he died? The young girl asked with a wink. Since you are asking this, something must have happened. I can't guess. Tell me. The woman smiled and the room suddenly became much warmer. You are so boring. The young girl pouted and then exclaimed in disbelief. He died from the stench. Stench. The woman in the room was shocked to hear this answer. Such a way of dying could be considered as shocking. Guess who did it? The young girl asked mischievously. I can't. The woman still smiled and shook her head. You have seen it before. The woman looked at her gently and didn't say a word. After a minute or two, the young girl couldn't hold on anymore and said dejectedly, Forget it, I will tell you. It was Qi Zixiao's gigolo. The woman opened her mouth slightly and revealed a surprised expression. Her thoughts immediately drifted to the man and woman she had met in the mountains last year, a little later than today. This woman was naturally Li Yuanzhu, and the young girl was Ning Qing. Ning Qing had grown taller over the past year, and the baby fat on her face had lessened. She looked much more mature than she was a year ago. I knew that guy wasn't a good person when I saw him last year, but I didn't expect him to do such an evil thing. I will teach him a lesson when I see him again. Ning Qing was furious at the thought of Rinpochen. She looked down and realized that her breasts had grown a lot over the past year. Li Yuanzhu couldn't help but laugh at her reaction. However, that man was really hard to evaluate. No one had ever spoken to her like that in her entire life. Rinpochen's words, "Her breasts are bigger than yours," left a deep impression on both of them. What exactly happened? Li Yuanzhu asked after some thought. I heard that the palace was suddenly covered with a stench, and the old emperor died from it. I wonder what kind of stench could kill the old emperor? Ning Qing asked curiously. Just as the empress had said, Rinpochen had indeed become famous. Moreover, it was a very famous one. That day, hundreds of stink bombs exploded within the imperial palace, virtually covering the entire imperial palace. The Xia emperor immediately passed out from suffocation. No one could live in the palace anymore. Almost all the concubines had moved out as if they were fleeing for their lives. Only a few eunuchs and guards were left in the palace. They felt like they were going to die at any moment. At the same time, they stuck to their posts, cleaning up the palace. It wasn't until 7 days later that the smell of the palace began to lessen. As for the Xia emperor, he had been in poor health for the past half year, and now that he had been tortured like this, he died within 2 days. Naturally, the morning letter that was sent out to the public could not say that Emperor Xia had died from the stench. If that was the case, everyone in the world would laugh their heads off. It could also not say that he had died from a serious illness, as such a major event in the royal palace could not be kept a secret. In the end, all the civil and military officials of the court came together and announced that Emperor Xia had been secretly poisoned to death. At the same time, Great Xia was also preparing to use this opportunity to divert the conflict within the country and divert the attention of the people to the murderer who poisoned Emperor Xia. They wanted to use this opportunity to win a breather. However, early the next morning, countless flyers were pasted all over the imperial capital. Rinpochen the murderer. These words were naturally written by Su Qing. He pondered for a long time. Rinpochen the one who released the poisonous gas bomb, Rinpochen the one who killed Emperor Xia with the stench. No matter which one sounded awkward, and he was afraid that Rinpochen would find trouble with him. After experiencing this incident, he was afraid that Rinpochen would find an opportunity to take revenge on him. In the end, he simply used the words Rinpochen the murderer. At first, the people of Great Xia were puzzled as to who Rinpochen was. Then they remembered that Gigolo Qi Zixiao who had poisoned tens of thousands of people to death. Coupled with the fact that the aboriginals had flaunted their prowess in Great Xia, the people were immediately agitated. In particular, with the secret efforts of some people, almost all of the people's spearheads were pointed at Dayo. One had to know that the emperor of Great Xia had actually been poisoned to death. How humiliating was this? If they didn't take revenge, what face would the imperial court have? This time, it was the imperial court's turn to feel numb. This was because they knew that this was really done by Rinpochen. Even if Rinpochen was in Dayo, and even if the aboriginals didn't have the strength to send so many things into the palace of Great Xia. However, the cylinders that remained in the palace indicated the identity of the owner of this object. It had to be Rinpochen. Although this exquisite object was different from the small melons that could explode on the battlefield, it had the same style. However, what the imperial court of Great Xia wanted to do now was to recuperate and not roll up their sleeves and start a life-and-death battle with the aboriginals. However, the current attitude of the people was also a form of pressure to them. At the same time, this incident had indeed enraged the imperial court. The attitude of the military generals was almost the same as that of the people. In addition, there was the crown prince of Great Xia. He still had a bunch of brothers who were eyeing him covetously. If the first thing he did after ascending to the throne wasn't to avenge Emperor Xia, the reaction of all parties could be imagined. Therefore, after a short period of chaos for various reasons, Great Xia, whether they were willing or not, had a unified attitude. This revenge had to be taken. At the same time, the entire Great Xia began to move. Orders to recruit soldiers, increase taxes, and collect food were quickly passed down. At the same time, there were too many people who knew about this matter. After all, there were too many people in the palace and nearly 1 million people in the capital. The true cause of Emperor Xia's death was also spread in the ears of some people, especially those who were well informed. Rinpochen also had a new nickname among some people, Stinky Emperor. On one hand, it was because Rinpochen had really killed an emperor with his stench. On the other hand, it was because of the power of the stench in the palace this time. Su Qing happily sent Rinpoche's new nickname to him in a secret letter. When Rinpoche received the letter, his face turned black. This wasn't even as good as the poison warrior from before. On the other hand, the Empress laughed heartily for a long time. This matter was really fun. In addition, the fact that Xia Baichong had died from the stench was also worthy of her happiness. She immediately sent an order to the court officials to hold a banquet in the palace that night to celebrate. Subsequently, the news that Xia Baichong had died from the stench spread along with the Empress's order. Many people laughed until their mouths twitched. The fact that the Emperor of Great Xia had died from the stench was simply the biggest joke in the world. Stinky Emperor, how exactly did you stink Xia Baichong to death? During the banquet, Tong Jingye came to Rinpoche's side with a face full of gossip. You want to know? Rinpoche's face turned black as he looked at him maliciously. I really want to know. Tong Jingye touched his beard, unable to suppress his exuberant curiosity. When Rinpoche saw that the others were also looking at him with a face full of gossip, he really had the urge to throw a skunk bomb at the banquet. However, after thinking about it, he would be beaten to death by the Empress. Then he gloomily said, "Wait for me outside the city tomorrow. If anyone else wants to know, you can come along. I will show you." Tong Jingye looked at Rinpoche for a long time before saying, "You are trying to trick me." Rinpoche cursed in his heart. This old fox wasn't like an aboriginal at all. However, I still can't suppress my curiosity. Tomorrow I will wait for you outside the city, Stinky Emperor. Tong Jingye hesitated for a while but still said resolutely. He really wanted to know what kind of stench could kill Emperor Xia. Wasn't it just a stench? Could it even kill a Cardinal Heaven expert like him? Chapter 594. The next day after class, Rinpoche put 2 skunk bombs in his bag and rushed out of the city with his guards. When he arrived outside the city, he saw that there were quite a lot of people. Dozens of burly men with bald or braided hair and arms big enough to race horses stood there. Dayo's officials were really idle. Tong Jingye and Qin Xuan were staring at each other. They were surrounded by officials from the Ministry of Works and the Ministry of War, as well as 2 assistant ministers. They were all laughing and joking around. Not far away stood Minister Shen Hua of the Ministry of Rights, Minister Zhu Yan of the Ministry of Justice, Minister Xiong Yaohe of the Ministry of Personnel, as well as officials from the Taichung Bureau, the Honglu Bureau, the Public Order Bureau, the Inspection Bureau, the Imperial Court, the Seal Bureau, the Meritorious Department, and the Examination Bureau. Other than the Great Elder, the Junior Elder, and the people from the Ministry of Revenue, almost everyone was present. Rinpoche reckoned that if this skunk bomb was thrown, all the higher-ups of Dayo would be wiped out. He originally thought that Tong Jingye brought a few small fries with him, but he didn't expect so many people to come. It would be easier to understand if Qin Xuan was here. However, weren't the curiosity of the others a little too exuberant? It could only be said that the aboriginals didn't have a lot of people. Sir Rin is here. Feng Ho laughed when he saw Rinpoche coming from afar and appeared in front of him in a few flashes. Why are there so many people? Rinpoche felt a little dizzy. Think about it. If a skunk bomb wiped out all the higher-ups of Dayo, how would they look at him in the future? Sir Tong and Sir Qin are making a bet on who can withstand Sir Ren's stench. After the news spread, the other officials were also curious about how Sir Ren managed to stink Xia Baichong to death. Feng Ho grinned with a ferocious face. Rinpoche pondered for a while and felt that there was something wrong with these words. What did he mean by my stench? He made it sound as if he smelled bad. He glanced at Feng Ho, then at the crowd and asked, "How did Minister Tong and Minister Qin make the bet? Whoever can't stand it has to stay away from the other party for a month." Feng Ho said. Rinpoche's face was full of vigor. These 2 were really brave warriors. If a person smelled this odor, they would definitely run away. But if the 2 of them were to make a bet, whoever ran away first would be the loser. The consequences would be too horrible to look at. Sir Ren, we have been waiting for a long time. Let me experience your stench. Tong Jingye turned his head and laughed at Rinpoche. Principal Ren, we have been waiting for a long time. Everyone cupped their hands. I finally grasped this opportunity today. In the future, old man, when you see me, you'll have to stay far away from me. Qin Xuan sneered. Who are you calling old man? Tong Jingye turned his head and asked Qin Xuan in disdain. The old man is calling you. Qin Xuan was the kind of person who had fallen into the same pit countless times. Rinpoche smiled and returned the salute as he walked into the crowd. He took out 2 skunk bombs from the back of his waist and gestured, Pull these open and throw them at your feet. It won't explode, right? Tang Xinye asked suspiciously. Whenever he saw this thing he felt like it was going to explode. This is not a bomb, how is that possible? Besides, even if it explodes it won't be a big deal to all of you. As he spoke, he handed the things to the two of them, one in each hand. He cupped his hands and said, "Everyone please carry on with your work. I still have to go back and see Her Majesty." After he finished speaking, he turned and ran away as if he was being chased by a dog. He was afraid that someone might throw him at the spot where the skunk bomb was to get back at him. He didn't want to experience the smell a second time after smelling it once. So it's like this. Pull this away, right? Tang Xinye fiddled with the skunk bomb, pulled the ring off and threw it at his feet. Qin Chuan did the same and the two of them stared at each other. In less than 5 seconds, an extremely strong and suffocating smell pervaded the air. The surrounding people immediately burst into an uproar and ran away. It was as if a bomb had exploded, and dozens of people immediately ran in all directions. They vomited as they ran, and their faces looked as if they had eaten feces. Sure enough, a stench that could kill Xia Baichong wasn't easy to deal with. Only Qin Chuan and Tang Xinye were left standing there with their faces turning green. They stared at each other, smelled the suffocating stench, and felt as if countless sledgehammers were hitting their heads. They were seeing stars and they couldn't help but feel snot and tears flowing down their cheeks. Sure enough, it's a stench that could kill Xia Baichong. Look. Tang Xinye's face looked as if his crotch had been kicked dozens of times. His face turned green for a while but he had to hold on and not run. Just now he almost ran away but when he subconsciously took a step, he remembered the bet and froze in place. Losing wasn't scary, but losing to an old enemy in front of him was unacceptable. You can't hold on anymore, right? If you can't hold on, get lost. Just stay away from me in the future. Qin Chuan's face was similar to Tang Xinye's as he gritted his teeth and held on. I'm fine but you are an old bag of bones. If you can't hold on, don't force yourself and end up like Xia Baichong. Tang Xinye's eyes were wide open as he squeezed his words out from the gaps between his teeth. Sir Ren's stench is extraordinary. If you can't hold on, just ask for mercy. I don't need you to stay away from me. Qin Chuan stared at Tang Xinye with his eyes wide open. Ha, old man, how can I, Tang Xinye, stand this little stench? If you can't hold on, just leave and I'll let you go. I don't need you to stay away from me. Tang Xinye wanted to let out a heroic laugh, but he almost vomited the moment he opened his mouth. In the end he could only force out a dry smile. Seeing that they couldn't convince each other, the two of them stared at each other while enduring the stench that was beyond their limits. Old bastard, you actually want to drag me with you even if you die. I definitely won't let you off, Tang Xinye cursed in his heart. He felt that his tears were about to flow out. Old man, you are actually still holding on. I don't believe that you can hold on. Qin Chuan thought to himself. The two of them stared at each other with their eyes wide open. The two iron cylinders under their feet were still emitting that stench, making the surrounding stench even more intense. Ha, do you dare to take a deep breath? Tang Xinye suddenly realized that Qin Chuan's chest wasn't moving at all and immediately laughed out loud. Why wouldn't I dare? Qin Chuan said as he took a deep breath. His stomach churned and he almost vomited his breakfast. However, he forcefully swallowed it back down. The taste of stomach acid was still coming out from the gaps between his teeth. He said in a sinister tone, Old man, do you dare to take a deep breath? The others had already escaped far away. However, even though they were far away they could still smell the stench on their bodies. It was as if the stench was like maggots in one's bones. They turned their heads to look at Qin Chuan and Tang Xinye, who were still standing in their original spots. They couldn't help but admire them. These two sirs are extraordinary. After saying this they ran back home to take a shower. Rinpochen ran all the way back to the top of the city wall and looked into the distance. He saw that the two figures were still standing there motionlessly. Rinpochen admired them and said, These two are really brave warriors. Bathing in the so-called hot feces pit wasn't necessarily comparable to the courage of these two people outside the city. At least he couldn't do it. However, he didn't know how long it would take for the stench to wash off their bodies if they just stood there like that. It was better to quickly inform the Empress and give them a day off. Chapter 595. The Empress ordered Tang Xinye and Qin Chuan not to attend morning court for 10 days after they heard each other. It was said that the two of them shut themselves in the residence after returning. There was no other way. No matter where they went, there was a fragrant wind. On the way back, the commoners looked at them as if they had seen ghosts. Wherever the two of them appeared, people would scatter. For the next few days, the two residences would occasionally be heard shouting, "Tong Jinya, you old man, I'll definitely teach you a lesson." Or, "Qin Chuan, you old man, I'll definitely teach you a lesson." Although the two of them shut themselves in the residence, they would occasionally walk around the residence. The end result was that the entire Qin residence and the Tong residence were filled with the smell. For the next period of time, Tong Lan would grind her canine teeth every time she saw Rinpochen at school and wanted to bite him. Finally, one day Rinpochen appeared at the training ground in the palace with a sullen face. The empress had already strictly ordered him to practice martial arts diligently. The reason was that Great Xia would definitely send people to assassinate him just like the previous few times since he had poisoned them. Although there were very few foreigners in Lan City, there were still some shopkeepers from the big clans who were on standby. With the addition of the Jing tribe, there was still a possibility of Great Xia people sneaking in. Rinpochen looked at Tong Lan with an embarrassed look on his face. He felt that the empress's words just now were all nonsense. No matter how much he practiced, it would be useless if he encountered a spirit wheel expert. He could only rely on his bodyguards to buy time and escape back to Earth. If he encountered an expert below the spirit wheel level, he wouldn't be able to get past his bodyguards. However, the empress was the most powerful person in the world. In the end, he still stood here. On the other hand, the little Lolita was excited. The Tong residence had been tossed around miserably these days, and now she could finally take revenge. "Yagüe, you said it yourself. You are the teacher at the school, so beating you up during practice isn't considered deceiving your teacher," the little Lolita said seriously as she clenched her fists. Rinpochen was flabbergasted and asked, "How is that possible? Your teacher will always be your teacher, and your grandfather will always be your grandfather. If you beat me up, you will be deceiving your teacher. I will look for your grandfather and have a good chat with him later." "He's at home. Go and look for him." Tong Lan sneered and then looked at the empress. "Don't worry about his identity." At the side, the empress was wearing sunglasses and lying on a recliner. Qin Yuan and Hong Yuan were holding a huge imperial canopy for her to use as a parasol. There were fruits and wine on the small round table beside her. If she were to change into a bikini, she would look like she was basking in the sun. Upon hearing the empress's order, Tong Lan grinned at him, revealing her two small canine teeth. In a flash, she appeared above his head and rained down a pair of small fists. Rinpochen narrowed his eyes and retreated a few meters. Could this stance be the legendary long-lost Pegasus Meteor Fist? I didn't expect this move to be used by your Tong clan. Tong Lan's imposing manner was suddenly stifled. She somersaulted in the air and landed on the ground. What is the Pegasus Meteor Fist? Then Rinpochen's vision darkened. He took large strides forward and executed the extremely vicious move of the Fist of Death, the heart-killing blade. Using one hand as a blade, he channeled all his strength into his arm and stabbed it toward Tong Lan. At this moment, when Rinpochen executed the heart-killing blade, the muscles on his arm bulged. His veins were like dragons winding around his arm. When he struck with his hand, there was a strong piercing sound as if the air was being sliced apart. The empress nodded her head slightly. This move of Rinpochen's was somewhat skillful, but it was still too inexperienced and not fast enough. Tong Lan leaped up slightly and stepped on Rinpochen's arm. Rinpochen felt a strong force pressing down on his arm. A gust of wind assaulted his face as Tong Lan kicked him. The next move of the heart-killing blade was either the ripper hand or the throat-ripping hand. After all, the Fist of Death was a fist technique used to kill enemies in the army. With Tong Lan's foot on Rinpochen's arm, he couldn't execute any of the moves he wanted to execute. If it was in the past, this kick from Tong Lan would basically end the battle. After all, regardless of strength or speed, Tong Lan had the absolute advantage. Unexpectedly, it was as if Rinpochen had already guessed this move. He immediately lay down, supported himself with both hands on the ground, and unexpectedly twisted his body. His waist was twisted at a 90-degree angle and both his legs were wrapped around Tong Lan's waist. It would have been fine if a woman used this move, but Rinpochen's current body weight was 120 kilograms. It was considered difficult for him to execute this move. This move was the simplest form of the hunter technique that the Empress had taught him, the ground entanglement. It was used when he learned the entanglement of pythons, to wrap around a person's waist, neck or jaw. However, he executed this move at this moment. Even though Tong Lan was a little surprised, she still twisted her body in midair. Her body was almost touching Rinpochen's legs as she twisted her body. Then she grabbed both of his legs with each hand and threw him out, creating a human-sized pit on the ground. Rinpoche was dizzy from the fall. He stood up and shook his head. Then he looked at Tong Lan with a dazed expression and said, "Your pants fell off. Do you think I will believe you? This move is outdated." Tong Lan wrinkled her nose and snorted. Then she felt a chill on both her legs. Rinpoche looked on helplessly as Tong Lan's pants fell off, revealing a small pair of flat pants. It was the kind that Lin Xiaola always wore and had a similar function as safety pants. After all, when the women in this world fought with others, they would raise their legs a lot and even jump to high places. If they didn't wear it like in ancient China, they would have long been exposed. Rinpoche subconsciously turned his head and looked at the Empress. He saw her holding a wine glass in one hand and looking at him with a smile that wasn't a smile. Rinpoche's face also turned red. After all, it wasn't very honorable to use this move on a 10-year-old Lolita. "Ah! I will fight it out with you." Tong Lan screamed as if she was being molested. Her face was as red as blood. An hour later Tong Lan left in a huff. Rinpoche's eye sockets were like those of a panda. Even though he still had panda eyes, there was still a huge improvement this time. At least, alright, even though he didn't injure Tong Lan, he had injured her belt. Even if she was careless, this was still a huge improvement. "Your ground entanglement is pretty good. How about the other moves?" The Empress laughed. "I still can't do it all. Many of the moves simply challenge the limits of humans." Rinpoche was also helpless. There were a total of 13 moves in the hunter technique, and he could only use 2 of them. There were still 5 moves that he could barely perform, and he couldn't even perform the rest of the moves. This set of moves is only effective on humans. However, you aren't in the mountains now and you don't have to face ferocious beasts. If you master this set of hunter technique, you will more or less have the ability to protect yourself, the Empress said faintly. The next day when Rinpoche went to class, Tong Lan saw that he was still panting with anger. Even though she was only a 10-year-old girl, the extraordinary humiliation of her pants falling off was enough for her to remember for the rest of her life. Moreover, she was wearing a pair of striped underpants and it was actually seen by others. This was simply a lifetime of humiliation. Rinpoche didn't really care. In any case, Tong Lan was panting with anger most of the time. After half a month, this group of students had made some progress with their steam train. At the very least, they had changed the single flywheel at the front into 2 large double flywheels. At the back, there was a row of wheels that gradually became smaller. The outside was wrapped with animal tendons and all the wheels were connected together. It was just like the tracks of a tank. At the same time, the connecting rods were all changed to the inside of the train. This was because they had consulted a few carpenters to make such rapid progress. However, they were merely consulting and Rinpoche had personally seen them make these things. Therefore Rinpoche didn't mind. After all, he couldn't ask this group of students to understand blacksmithing and carpentry. Even though there were pointers from the carpenters, most of it was their own effort. Chapter 596. In the following days, Rinpoche's students were stuck in a situation where the locomotive was too heavy and the steam engine couldn't move it. Furthermore, the steam engine was too big and the structure couldn't support it. Between these two situations, the size of the locomotive started to increase. Half a month later, seeing that the locomotive was half the size of a courtyard, Rinpoche finally couldn't help but ask, "Can't you bunch of idiots change the structure to iron? Iron is too expensive. We can't afford it." Tong Lan raised her small face and said confidently. Everyone nodded their heads. Rinpoche was so angry that he almost laughed. A bunch of officials' children. Well, even though they were good-for-nothings among the officials' children, they still had a lot of pocket money, right? With so many people pooling together, they shouldn't be unable to afford iron, right? However, their expressions didn't seem to be fake. Rinpoche recalled that he hadn't been paying much attention to the current situation of Dayo's iron production, so he didn't say anything more. However, he had recently discovered some interesting phenomena. In the past it was fine, but ever since the steam engine was made, these students gradually divided into 3 levels. The first level consisted of Tong Lan and Shurgan, who were the strongest. At this moment it could be seen from their bodies that the rest of the students were more or less dirty, but they were relatively clean. However, the cleanliness of the 2 of them was different. Tong Lan's entire body was clean and refreshing. She was dressed in white, which was completely out of place in the messy surroundings. As for Shurgan, even though his chest and sleeves looked a little dirty, one could tell from his hands that they were clean without any traces of work. However, he made his clothes a little dirty so that he didn't look so special. It could only be said that he was indeed the son of the great elder. He was on a completely different level from Tonglan, who was a silly girl with a brain full of muscles. These two people were mainly responsible for talking and giving advice. Among them, Shirgan had put forward many useful suggestions. As for Tonglan, she was only used as a talker and a mascot. Even though Tonglan seemed to have done a lot of things recently, these were all because of differences in ideology, such as fighting with Shirgan and coming up with bad ideas. The second level consisted of a small number of people who were stronger, did less work and mainly did odd jobs and came up with ideas. Unexpectedly, this group of people was made up of commoner students. These people were relatively hard-working, and their individual strengths were pretty good. After entering Renbachian school by chance, their performance was generally pretty good. The last group was led by Du Laolu and the rest, who were good-for-nothings from the various clans. All of them were dirty and had been reduced to coolies. The Aboriginals' respect for martial prowess and the law of the jungle was clearly displayed here. However, Renbachian felt that this kind of division wasn't too bad. At the very least, it was much better than having the coolies be the children of commoners. The ethos of Dayo was still relatively simple. After class, he went to the Ministry of Works to ask about it. After asking around, he found out that the students really couldn't afford it. It wasn't fake, it was real. Even though the mining of the Damo iron mine in Dayo had been going very smoothly for the past 6 months, causing Dayo's iron production to soar, the price of the iron mine hadn't dropped by much. Dayo's demand for iron was simply too high. Even though Mount Damo had produced quite a lot of iron ore, it still had to satisfy the needs of the army. During the war, the consumption of weapons had always been very fast. Moreover, the militia also needed a large amount of weapons. After removing these two items, there weren't that many weapons that ended up in the hands of the commoners. After all, the Mount Damo iron mine had only been mining with the solar furnace for slightly more than half a year. At the very most, there were only 500,000 kilograms of iron, and only about 50,000 weapons were forged. Even though it was already 100 times faster than before, the time was still too short. Nowadays, there were more weapons among the commoners than before, but most of them were concentrated in the north. They were mainly made from the weapons left behind by Great Xia. As a result, the price of iron was still very high and only slightly lower than before. It was fine to let these students pool their money to buy 1 or 2 weapons, but they didn't have to think about the rest. 1 kilogram of iron cost about 4 taels of silver. Including the various structures, connecting rods and wheels of the steam engine, they would need at least 500 kilograms of iron, which was 4,000 taels of silver. The monthly salary of a low-level official was only 6 taels of silver. Even though most of these students came from good backgrounds, firstly, Aboriginal officials weren't very wealthy. Secondly, most of these students were good-for-nothings, who weren't very well received by their clans, so they didn't have much money. As a result, they really couldn't afford 4,000 taels of silver. Upon seeing this, Renbachian returned to the palace and found the empress. He specially transferred 1,500 kilograms of iron to the Black Bamboo Academy and ordered the Ministry of Works to transfer a few blacksmiths over. They partitioned a courtyard in a corner of the academy. Every day after school they would hammer there, and finally, the production of the locomotive was back on track. In fact, as long as the power problem was solved and there was a clear goal, it wasn't too difficult to complete. It was just a matter of time before a suitable structure could be developed. Only then would they be able to manufacture this horribly ugly locomotive with a hair-raising conversion rate. Even though Renbachian had a complete train drawing from the early 20th century in his hand, he didn't intend to take it out. He left it to the students to improve bit by bit, and the value of the harvest was much higher than that of a train. Renbachian had been quietly observing their changes and waiting for the day they would transform. Renbachian's daily life had also become one of the 2 places he had been looking forward to, the palace and the academy. Other than attending classes every day, he would cultivate in the palace. Every now and then he would be taught a lesson by the little Lolita. At other times he would accompany the empress to sit in the palace in a daze or walk around the palace to observe the subtle changes. For example, the street lamps that could be seen everywhere. After returning to Lan City for a few months, Renbachian began to carry out his palace illumination project. When he had nothing to do, he would bring back some street lamp equipment and batteries. After a few months, there was now a street lamp every 20 meters in the palace. This allowed the palace to be brightly lit throughout the night, as if it was a city that never slept. The empress was extremely happy with such a change. When she had nothing to do, she would sit on the roof of the palace chamber and drink wine at night. As far as her eyes could see, she would see the bright palace. At the same time, such a change made the imperial guards and maids in the palace a little uncomfortable. They didn't use torches or palace lanterns at night anymore. It was as if the palace had suddenly become a city that never slept in a few months. Regardless of whether it was day or night, there wasn't a single place that was dark. Even in other parts of Lan City, one could see the exceptionally bright palace every night. The biggest impact this had on them was that they couldn't find a place to pee anywhere they wanted. It was too bright. After all, in a brightly lit place under the watchful eyes of everyone, it took courage to pee anywhere they wanted. Similarly, the officials in the imperial court were amazed by the huge changes in the palace. At the very beginning, they had discovered the street lamps in the palace. After all, there were so many pillars on both sides of the road that it was impossible to not see them. However, there were only a few of them at that time. Coupled with the subsequent war with Great Xia and the pacification of Tianjing Basin, Renbaqian and the Empress weren't in the palace, leaving them in Lan City to speculate. However, no matter how they speculated, there was one thing that everyone was sure of. This kind of treasure that absorbed light during the day and released at night was definitely very valuable. They didn't expect that within a few months of the Empress and Renbaqian's return, the palace would be covered with such treasures, leaving no blind spots in the palace. Although it was extremely beautiful, it also made many people even more shocked. How much did it cost to build so many treasures and where did they come from? In addition, there were still battles going on in the northeast and southeast. The sudden change in the palace caused a lot of criticism. In fact, this wasn't the only change. Many of the windows in the palace were also replaced with glass. However, everyone knew that the glass was made by the imperial family. Although it was expensive, it didn't cause much discussion. On the contrary, these street lamps were more precious treasures than the luminous pearls in the eyes of many people. After all, how bright were the luminous pearls? How could they compare to these street lamps in the palace? This caused many officials to privately discuss that the Empress had changed and had become too extravagant. Chapter 597. Those guys were talking about the street lamps in the palace again today, the Empress said unhappily as she sat at the table. On the table between the Empress and Renbaqian, there was a steaming hot pot exuding an alluring aroma. Not far from them there was an ice basin and a fan blowing cool air at them. Your Majesty, did you lose your temper again? Renbaqian filled the Empress's glass with wine and asked with a smile. The Empress snorted. In any case, the Dayo court was full of tough people, and it wasn't a big deal for them to be kicked and slapped twice. I explained it earlier, but they didn't understand and always thought that I was too extravagant. Furthermore, they have no right to question my actions. The Empress said unhappily after drinking a glass of wine. In fact, the last sentence was what the Empress wanted to say. If it were someone else, a few more explanations would clear up everyone's doubts. However, with the Empress's temperament, how could she explain so much calmly? The officials of Dayo found it hard to understand that these street lamps weren't worth much. In fact, street lamps could be considered treasures in this world. After all, they didn't have soot and smoke and they were always bright and never extinguished. If they were sold outside, a lot of people would rush to buy them. Dayo wasn't a wealthy country, and the treasury of the palace depended entirely on Dayo's share of the gold mines to maintain the royal family's expenses. Everyone was used to this. Now that the palace had suddenly become like this, many people felt that something was wrong. However, the Empress was arrogant and only said a few words. Even if others asked, she was too lazy to explain, which caused many people to misunderstand. Perhaps I should explain to them, Renbaqian said after thinking for a while. In fact, he had heard about this before, but the Empress didn't say anything and no one asked him. He couldn't possibly go out and explain that these street lamps weren't worth much. You don't have to worry about this, the Empress said coldly. Pour me a glass of wine. Renbaqian filled the Empress's glass with wine and toasted her from afar. After drinking the wine, he changed the topic and asked, how are things in the northeast and southeast? There are 573 cities of different sizes in the Yun nation, and Zedonglai has conquered 33 cities near the border. As for the southeast, it's still small and there aren't many movements. At this point, the Empress regained some energy. Conquering a city was a big deal for any emperor. This was true even for the Empress. Are there enough troops at the front line? Renbaqian asked. Originally, the Protectorate of the Northeast only had 15,000 soldiers. Another 40,000 new soldiers were sent over, bringing the total to 55,000. Before the war with Great Xia, the Aboriginals had less than 100,000 soldiers. 55,000 was already half of the original amount. The Empress pondered for a while and said, I have already prepared to recruit 40,000 new soldiers. After the new year, I will pass down the conscription order. The food problem has been solved? Those sweet potatoes, pumpkins and potatoes of yours have played a big role. Under Gui Hong's promotion, the output is quite good. Next year I plan to promote them on a larger scale. In addition, your canned food factory now provides rations for about 10,000 soldiers. It's just that many people are scolding you. The Empress pursed her lips and smiled when she mentioned this matter. Ren Baqin was the scapegoat for this matter. This subject is ashamed to receive this scolding. We can exchange the canned food for livestock in the various cities and send it to the army. Ren Baqin laughed. It was already good enough that they weren't hungry, yet they were still picky. There's no need to do this for the time being. It can only provide rations for 10,000 soldiers, mainly because the transportation distance is too long. After recruiting new soldiers next year, we can use canned food, sweet potatoes, pumpkins and potatoes as rations for the new soldiers. This way we won't have to transport them to the Yun nation, the Empress said casually. Ren Baqin thought about it and reckoned that he still had to bear this scolding. The two of them drank 4 bottles of sorghum wine and were slightly tipsy. Your wine tastes better. I wonder if there's any more? The Empress asked with her beautiful eyes. I have already told the Zhang family that this kind of wine has to be brewed for 10 years before being highly purified. The Zhang family still has a batch in the Yun nation, but they can't ship it over now. We have to wait for Protector Z to conquer more than half of the Yun nation. As Ren Baqin spoke, he saw the Empress stand up and walk out. After the two of them left the hall, the Empress pulled Ren Baqin and leaped onto the roof. Looking around, the entire palace was brightly lit. The Empress sat on the roof, supported her chin with her hand and said happily, I like this palace very much. Then she changed the topic and said, it's just that those people are too annoying. Ren Baqin smiled bitterly. The Empress had changed her mind again. She disliked them for being long-winded and annoying, but she wasn't willing to explain in detail to them. He reached out to grab the Empress's hand and caressed it. The Empress's palm still gave off a delicate, soft and warm feeling. What do you imagine Deo to be like? The Empress allowed him to grab her arm, looked ahead and suddenly fell into deep thought. In fact, the two of them had discussed this question many times, but it required too much time to realize. Therefore, from time to time she would use this method to imagine it. Just like a girl who loved to fantasize. Standing together with your majesty is the world that I want, Ren Baqin said softly. The Empress tilted her head and looked at him. Then she turned her head and said, what a slippery answer. What I want to know is what the future Deo should be like in your mind. Flying cars are everywhere. Robots do most of the work. After entering communism, the commoners have nothing to do and look at this and that on the streets every day for fun. Then the two of them looked at each other and one of them said, what are you looking at? The other one said, what's wrong with looking at you? Then the two of them punched and kicked each other. Finally it turned into a street brawl. After that, both of them were arrested and sent to the Public Order Bureau to be whipped. After Ren Baqin finished speaking, he was kicked down by the Empress. This fellow's words were really too much of a wet blanket. Ren Baqin got up from the ground, jumped to the top of the wall at the side, and then jumped to the main hall and sat beside the Empress. Seeing that the Empress was about to kick him, he quickly waved his hand and said, although I said it for fun, it's not completely fake. This kind of thing will happen when the speed of spiritual progress is far behind the speed of material progress. However, I'm afraid that I won't be able to see this scene, but your majesty might be able to. Even if Ren Baqin and the Empress were at the same level, his lifespan would be much shorter than hers. Furthermore, Ren Baqin had to travel between 2 worlds and consume a lot of his lifespan on Earth. I won't let you die too early. However, you only move once I whip you. Tomorrow I will prepare a whip for you. If you don't practice diligently, I will whip you. The Empress tilted her head and looked at him. Her tone was full of eagerness to try. Chapter 598. It was already the middle of December in this world, but the sun was still high up in the sky like a furnace. 4 seasons of hot weather. No 2 seasons a year. One rainy season and the other dry season. Even though it was the rainy season, the weather was still stuffy. As for the dry season, it made people sweat profusely outside. A man's groaning voice came from the training ground in the palace. At this moment, Rinpoche was doing a split on the hot flagstone. Then he bent his legs toward his neck with all his might. He felt pain in his legs as if they were about to be torn apart. Another feeling he had was the pain in his balls. It was really the pain in his balls. His balls were pressed tightly against the hot flagstone, and Rinpoche inexplicably thought of the legendary fried eggs on a flagstone. For a man who was 175 meters tall and weighed 220 kilograms to do such a thing, what kind of F***K was this? Your body is too stiff. Hold on for another 5 minutes. Doing this every day will soften your body, and you will be able to achieve twice the results with half the effort when you practice the hunter technique. The Empress was sitting in a chair with a whip in one hand and a wine glass in the other. Behind her were the two maids, Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan, who were smiling like flowers. Rinpoche looked like he was about to cry. Who did he offend? He just said a few words on the roof of the palace hall, and the next day the Empress actually did as she said and switched to using a whip. Every time he wanted to put his leg down, the Empress's whip would make a whistling sound and hit the stone slab beside him. The entire stone slab would crack. One had to know that this was a stone slab that was 2 inches thick. Your Majesty. It's almost cooked. Rinpoche felt wronged. Pass down the order to apply the purple grass ointment on him before training tomorrow, the Empress said to Hong Yuan. Yes, Your Majesty. Hong Yuan pursed her lips and smiled. Forget it, I can still hold on for a while. Rinpoche's facial expression suddenly changed. Purple grass ointment was roughly equivalent to essential balm in this world, but it had some other effects. However, Rinpoche absolutely didn't want to experience applying essential balm to his balls a second time. After persevering for 5 minutes with great difficulty, Rinpoche nimbly jumped up, ran to the chair beside the Empress and lay down. Then he gulped down a big mouthful of iced fruit juice and finally felt alive. Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan used the canopy to shield him from the shadows. I thought I almost died. Rinpoche heaved a sigh of relief. It's not that I want to watch over you, but you are too lazy, the Empress said helplessly. Rinpoche was good in other aspects, but he was too lazy when it came to practicing martial arts. It was better to cultivate the Rui visualization. After all, this was the foundation. As for the other martial arts, he didn't care about them at all. For a whole year the only thing he could use was probably the Fist of Death. Rinpoche's progress in the hunter art, which was highly valued by the Empress, had always been slow. When Rinpoche practiced it himself, he would immediately give up when the pain level reached a certain level. As a result, the Empress had no choice but to keep an eye on him. She even resorted to using her whip. However, the Empress felt that using a whip was rather fun. But I see that Her Majesty is quite happy when she wields the whip. Rinpoche looked resentful. Qing Yuan pursed her lips and smiled. Sir Ren's treatment is unique, and Her Majesty doesn't care about others so much. Rinpoche sighed faintly. This was life. The hardest thing to bear was the kindness of a beauty. Wasn't that right? However, it was especially hard to bear the kindness of a beauty like the Empress. During dinner with the Empress, Rinpoche said, Your Majesty, do you want to experience the atmosphere of New Year on Earth? It's completely different from Dayo. There are no walls full of skeletons and the atmosphere is much more normal. The Empress muttered, Has Luotian finished? It should be the last 2 episodes. Rinpoche's face immediately turned black. Your Majesty, are you still thinking about watching the show? Let's go then, the Empress said after some thought. Otherwise she would have to wait for Rinpoche to download it and bring it back. Rinpoche opened his mouth. Where did that cold and aloof Empress go? Why did she become a drama-crazed demon? Your Majesty, you have to go back to my house for New Year's and see my parents. Rinpoche gave her a heads-up to avoid any unpredictable situations. I saw them the last time. Although they are quiet, they are quite kind, the Empress said after some thought. She still remembered Rinpoche's parents. That's because they are quiet in front of you. They are usually very mischievous. Especially my father. Rinpoche thought about this sentence but didn't say it out loud. It was good that the Empress didn't react. This year he could bring the Empress back to celebrate the New Year with him. It wasn't bad as long as his parents didn't dare to take a deep breath like last time. The two of them returned to Earth in Rinpoche's room. As the house became more and more crowded, he changed from the living room to his bedroom every time. The two of them only saw the surrounding air distort and the environment change. Then there was a clamor from downstairs which sounded like a market. They could also vaguely hear voices like, 4 twos, and little one. Both of them changed their clothes, and the Empress immediately transformed from a monarch into a city beauty. She wore a long red dress, Alright, it had always been red. Then she wore a pair of flat-soled cloth shoes. The old Beijing cloth shoes were worn by the Empress and gave off the vibe of a top international luxury brand. Her hair casually scattered down her back like a waterfall. Hello, boss lady boss. The children left on Earth in the mountains were no longer 6 muscular men, but 16. Seeing the 2 of them coming down from upstairs, the sofa and other things immediately clattered. Wine bottles fell all over the floor, and 2 decks of poker cards were scattered. Imagine the scene of 16 burly men who weighed 150 kilograms drinking. The petite Dingjie was like a bean sprout sandwiched among them. His face was painted with the word tortoise, and he looked aggrieved as he shouted, "Boss lady boss." All 16 of them had clean faces. Only Dingjie's face was covered in scars. He was almost unrecognizable. Renbachien wondered if they were playing a game where whoever won could paint a tortoise on his face. Renbachien couldn't bear to ask why only Dingjie's face was painted with tortoise. He couldn't bear to ask if he should give Dingjie a raise. However, after thinking about how Dingjie seemed to have followed and called her lady boss, he decided to forget about the raise. It's the new year the day after tomorrow. Aren't you going back? Renbachien looked at Dingjie and asked. My flight is tomorrow morning, Dingjie immediately replied. Renbachien nodded, then called Shen Feng to book 2 round-trip tickets for him. After the call, the dozen winged cavalry warriors cleaned up the area around the sofa. Renbachien lazily sat on the sofa and said, You can't just eat, sleep and beat Daodu here every day. You have to do something. Lady boss, who is Daodu? The 16 winged cavalry warriors asked curiously. I am Daodu. Dingjie said indignantly with a tortoise face. When he thought about this, he felt like a resentful wife. This was simply a tragedy. What happened to the poor mountain children? How did it turn out like this? Cough cough. Renbachien coughed. I originally wanted to set up a security company, but after thinking about it, I decided to build a few martial arts centers. It's more suitable for all of you. Renbachien's original goal wasn't to bring more than a dozen winged cavalry warriors to guard the door, but to establish his own power to prevent himself from being restricted. Currently, the winged cavalry warriors had stayed here for more than a year and had a basic understanding of the situation on Earth. It was time to let them out. Where's Luotian? Help me find it. The Empress poked Renbachien. Half of Renbachien's body immediately went numb. Renbachien found Luotian for the Empress and then continued to say to everyone with a calm face, You probably have an idea. Dingjie, when the time comes you won't have to stay idle. I will make arrangements for you. Why can I only watch it for 6 minutes? The Empress poked Renbachien again. Half of Renbachien's body went numb again. He glanced at the Empress with a hidden bitterness, took the phone, looked at it and said, The membership period has expired. I will charge it now. After he was done, Renbachien looked up at everyone in front of him, opened his mouth and suddenly forgot what he wanted to say. Chapter 599. Early the next morning, Renbachien and the Empress went downstairs and saw the 16 winged cavalry warriors standing there in an orderly manner with looks of anticipation on their faces. Shi Yang and Gulu in particular were just short of shouting, It's me, it's me, it's me. Renbachien's face was bright and full of expression. Last year he had brought Shi Yang and Gulu home as guards to celebrate the new year. In the end, the 2 of them staged a victorious escape. They caused trouble along the way and even ran to Sanfatso's place. This year, Sanfatso had even invited the 2 of them for a vacation several times, all through the government, and young Senator Renbachien didn't know how the 2 of them had moved the post-80s generation, who was regarded as the strongest in the world and resisted the pressure from the whole world. Xiong Sui, you 2. The rest of you stay here obediently. I'll get someone to send wine and meat over. Renbachien glanced at the winged cavalry warriors and picked 2 of them who had arrived first to be his guards. The 2 of them were immediately overjoyed. They had been listening to them boast about their experiences in the outside world every day for the past year, which made the others very envious. After the 4 of them went out, Renbachien occasionally turned to look at the Empress as he drove. What are you looking at? If you continue to look, I will gouge out your eyeballs. The Empress said coldly, feeling uncomfortable under his gaze. Renbachien smiled and said, It's rare to see your Majesty put on makeup and dress up. You look even more beautiful. Today the Empress was wearing a red dress with a black coat. She actually applied a layer of lipstick today, which was very rare. Even though she didn't put on any other makeup, her fiery red lips made her look even more gorgeous. The two people in the back seat didn't dare to reply and completely pretended not to hear anything. The Empress snorted softly and turned to look out of the window. Even though she had never celebrated the new year in this world, she had seen it in many TV dramas. At least she knew that it was quite important, especially when the whole city would be filled with fireworks during the new year, which made her look forward to it very much. "Hey, Steel Centipede!" the Empress suddenly called out. Ren Baqin turned to look and saw a mother and son by the roadside. The child was only 5 or 6 years old, and the mother was in her early 30s. There was also a mechanical dog crawling under their feet. The steel centipede that the Empress was referring to was the mechanical dog. The Empress's first mechanical dog was destroyed by Qing Ping. Ren Baqin made a few more for the Empress. She named them Steel Centipede, Steel Tooth, Steel Bone, Steel Bar, Steel Skin and Steel Claw. She liked them for a period of time. However, recently the Empress rarely charged them. She didn't expect to see someone else's robot dog here and was reminded of it. In fact, when the Empress saw that mechanical dog, she was reminded of the days when she liked those little things. She was a little sentimental. After all, those mechanical dogs were still a very happy memory in her mind, and there weren't many such things in her memory. It was already February 11th, 2021. Another year had passed in a flash. Although Shanghai had not changed much, there were still some differences. Ren Baqin had seen advertisements for self-driving cars many times. In fact, he had seen quite a few of them along the way. This made him decide to buy one to free his hands. In this way, he could even give up the idea of letting those idiots get a driver's license. He believed that those idiots would definitely drive a car like a tank. In addition, there were many self-driving banks and supermarkets that had only been tried out a few years ago. Occasionally, they could be seen on certain street corners. Advertisements for homeschooling robots were everywhere and could often be seen on self-driving buses. Even small hospitals that mainly used medical robots had begun to appear. It was said that ordinary diseases could be diagnosed, prescribed, and even given intravenous drips by robots that were connected to the internet in such small hospitals. In the future, such medical robot hospitals would be promoted to every community and street. They would even enter many families like homeschooling robots. Flying motorcycles weren't available due to air traffic control. However, he had already seen scenes of flying motorcycles flying everywhere in some oil-producing countries. Some countries had already begun to prepare for new air traffic regulations. For China, this was an unstoppable future. Everything was developing and changing at a rapid pace. Even Ren Baqin didn't know what the future of Earth would be like. The times were changing too fast, and it was even faster for him. He always felt that he would be abandoned by the new era at any time. Every time he came back, he would seize the opportunity to understand the changes on Earth. When they arrived in Shicheng, it was snowing. This made Xiong and Su Wei a little excited. It was rare to see snow in Dayo. Even the Empress would stretch out her hand to touch the fluttering snowflakes in the air. When the surrounding people saw them, they knew that they were from the south. However, with Xiong and Su Wei, these two fierce-looking big guys around, no one dared to talk to them. They hailed 2 taxis and went straight to their hometown. On the way, Ren Baqin received a call from Mama Ren and returned home before the sky turned dark in the afternoon. When they returned, Ren Baqin's father was still carrying things and smoking and bragging with his neighbor at the corridor entrance. When he saw them, he immediately beamed with joy. "You are back." Ren Baqin's father put on a stern face and put on a dignified front in front of his neighbor. He then warmly said to the Empress, "Zixiao is here too. Why are you wearing so little? And these two?" The Empress was wearing a red dress and a black fur coat, which indeed looked a little thin. "Your eldest son is back?" The neighbor was also a man in his 50s. He had long heard that this family had an eldest son who was very rich and lived in another place. This was the first time he saw him. After looking at them, he immediately felt apprehensive. The lady was extremely beautiful and didn't look like an ordinary person. As for the other 3, not only did they not look like ordinary people, but they also didn't look like good people. Especially those 2 with ferocious faces, it would make anyone's heart tremble at the sight of them. There was also a burly man who should be the eldest son of the Ren family, right? They were the same family, but why was there such a big difference? Ren Baqin looked at the Ren family's elderly couple and the youngest son who occasionally came back, and they all looked kind and normal. But this one, and the 2 behind, were obviously not the same kind of people. Subconsciously, he felt that he should stay away from the Ren family. "Let's talk another day. We are going up first." Ren Baqin's father said to his neighbor and warmly greeted them. "It's cold outside, come in quickly." After entering the elevator, Rinpoche looked at the Empress and found that her body was a little stiff. Her gaze was also a little wandering as she kept staring at the ceiling. Rinpoche reached out to grab the Empress's hand and was ruthlessly squeezed. Ah! Rinpoche's face turned green as he took a deep breath. He felt that the bones in his hand were about to break. What's wrong? Rinpoche quickly looked over and then looked up at the ceiling, but he didn't see anything. Nothing. Rinpoche took a deep breath and turned to look at the Empress with an aggrieved look. The Empress glared at him, which made him feel a little baffled. He didn't do anything to provoke her. After entering the house, Rinpoche called out to Mama Rin, "Look who's here." "Brother." Rin Wanyin came out of the room and was pleasantly surprised when he saw his brother. "Sister-in-law. This is the first time I've seen you in person. You're even more beautiful than in photos. Prettier than a celebrity." The Empress nodded slightly as a form of greeting. As for Rin Wanyin's words, she calmly accepted them. She had always thought that people who weren't Rinpoche were speaking a very normal truth that didn't need to be doubted. Did she need to care about other people speaking the truth? No need. Therefore, she naturally didn't feel that there was anything wrong with such praise. However, the way she looked at Rin Wanyin became gentler and more pleasing to the eye. Chapter 600. For the rest of the night, Mama Rin, Papa Rin, and Rin Wanyin practically circled around the Empress. The three of them didn't talk much. After all, it took a lot of courage to talk to the Empress. The three of them didn't know the Empress's hobbies and didn't know what to say. The Empress's aura didn't allow them to casually talk about their daily lives. The three of them lingered around the Empress from time to time. Occasionally, Rinpoche could hear Mama Rin talking on the phone and saying things like, "My son's girlfriend is here, so I won't be going." Perhaps all parents in the world had the heart to show off. From showing off their obedience in the beginning, to showing off their studies, to showing off their work, to showing off their income, to showing off their daughter-in-law, and finally to showing off their grandchildren, there was nothing to flaunt about money. Papa Rin and Mama Rin had started to hide their wealth to avoid some troublesome matters. After all, he was a member of the older generation, so he was quite cautious in this aspect. Her son had been away for several years and rarely showed his face. Although he had always said that he had a girlfriend, he had never shown her face, which made many people mutter incessantly. "Look, this is my daughter-in-law." Mama Rin took a selfie that Rinpoche had taken when he was fleeing for his life abroad. Then, many surprised voices could be heard. This was also what Mama Rin liked to talk about recently. Now that her son and daughter-in-law were finally at home, she wanted the whole world to know. Whose daughter-in-law was so beautiful? Such temperament? He was a civil servant, and his position was not low at all. It could be said to be perfect. That night, the Empress was exhausted. Although she seemed to be sitting in the same position, there were always people hovering around her. It was very uncomfortable. At night, the Empress finally found an opportunity to ask Rinpoche softly, "When are we going to set off the fireworks?" Rinpoche asked, "What fireworks?" "What fireworks? It was banned a long time ago. How could there be fireworks?" The Empress's face immediately turned black. He was hoping to see the fireworks in the city, but he was told that there weren't any? "Do you want to be whipped?" When Rinpoche saw the Empress's expression, he immediately figured it out. Could it be that the Empress came over so happily just to watch the fireworks? Otherwise, why would he ask this question at this time? He immediately changed the topic and said, "But if you want to set off fireworks, who would refuse? Even if it's forbidden, it's not impossible. However, the others are within the forbidden range. When the time comes, I can only release them myself." The Empress thought about it. She wanted to see the whole city filled with fireworks. If he couldn't see it, then releasing it himself was also an option. However, the root of his teeth was still itching. He felt that he had been cheated this time. He had worked hard for a whole night, and it was very likely that he would have to work hard for another night, but in the end he didn't see anything. Although the whole city full of fireworks was something she had imagined after watching the TV series, she had selectively forgotten about it. There were 4 rooms in this house, and there was a guest room for the Empress to stay in. As for the 2 winged cavalry warriors, they squeezed into the same room as Rinpoche and were chased out to sleep in the living room. The 2 of them didn't mind. What kind of environment had they not experienced in the winged cavalry? Too many times in the wilderness, it was already good enough to have a roof to cover one's body. It was just that when Rinpoche went to the toilet in the middle of the night, he almost got a fright. With the help of the light from the room, he saw 2 people sitting on the sofa. Their eyes were bright, like light bulbs in the dark night. In the middle of the night, these 2 silhouettes were really scary. Why aren't the two of you asleep yet? Rinpoche heaved a sigh of relief and asked. In the end, the two of them didn't respond at all. Rinpoche frowned, and his heart immediately skipped a beat. The two of them weren't replying. What had happened? What happened? Xiong Su Wei. Rinpoche called out softly, but the two of them still didn't respond. Rinpoche's heart immediately tightened. Had something happened? However, after thinking about it carefully, there shouldn't be anything on earth that could affect the two of them. Even if there was something, it couldn't be hidden from the Empress who was sleeping next door. After standing still for 2 minutes, Rinpoche reached out to turn on the light with his heart in his mouth. He then saw the two of them sitting upright on the sofa with their eyes wide open, looking ahead as if they were staring at something. Rinpoche looked in the direction that the two of them were looking at. Other than the television hanging on the wall, there was nothing else. What exactly is going on? Rinpoche stood there and carefully sized them up for a long time, but he couldn't see anything. He went forward to take a closer look at the two of them, only to find that their eyes were slack and completely unfocused. He stretched out his hand and waved it in front of their eyes, but they didn't react at all. Their chests were moving up and down, but they were still alive. Rinpoche's heart was in his mouth again. Could something have happened to the two of them? They were both winged cavalry warriors, so what could have happened to them? Could it be that they had been restrained by someone? Who could restrain the two of them without alerting the Empress? It was impossible for such a person to appear on Earth, right? Even if it was that mysterious monk. Could it really be that mysterious monk? It shouldn't be. That monk didn't have any conflicts with him, and he even received the second batch of peaches from him 2 months ago. Could it be that there was someone like that monk on Earth? At the thought of this, Rinpoche's eyes suddenly sharpened, and he shouted in a low voice, "Who is it?" There was silence. Rinpoche looked around the room and saw that there was nothing wrong with the surroundings. There wasn't a single person, and the windows and doors were all tightly shut. "Don't blame me if you don't come out now." There was still silence. Was there really no one? What exactly happened? Could it be that there was something supernatural that he didn't understand? Rinpoche raised his vigilance. After confirming that there was no danger, he gently shook their shoulders. Their slack eyes immediately focused, and they looked at Rinpoche as if they had just woken up from a dream. "Lady Boss? What's wrong? What's wrong with the two of you?" Rinpoche looked around vigilantly and asked. "Resting." "That's right, resting." Rinpoche's face immediately darkened. He had been pondering for half a day, but the two of them had been sleeping peacefully. Were the two of them sleeping with their eyes open? And both of them together? And their eyes were opened wide like copper bells? And they were sleeping so soundly? Rinpoche didn't know what to say. He ignored the two of them with a gloomy face and strolled to the bathroom to relieve himself. He then came out with 2 towels and placed them on their heads, covering their faces. "Sir Rin? Cover your faces so that you don't scare people." Rinpoche turned off the lights with a gloomy face. He looked back with the light in the room and inexplicably felt like the zombies in Lin Jingying's zombie movies. After returning to his room to sleep for a short while, he heard the sound of another door opening, followed by Ren Wanyan's frightened scream. Then Rinpoche's parents went out to check. After a period of noise, the room finally quieted down again. The next day Ren Wanyan woke up with dark circles under his eyes. He looked at Rinpoche bitterly and said, "Brother, I was scared to death last night." Rinpoche snorted and naturally wouldn't tell him that he was also scared to death last night and even had a battle of wits with the air for half a day. Not long after, Papa Ren and Mama Ren came out, followed by the Empress. Among them, only the Empress wasn't affected much. In fact, the Empress also couldn't sleep last night. Living in such an unfamiliar environment and surrounded by a few unfamiliar but important people, the Empress actually suffered from insomnia, which was rare. Naturally, he could hear everything that was happening outside clearly. Even Rinpoche, who was having a battle of wits with the air, could hear it clearly. Although she didn't see many things, she could completely imagine them. However, she had no intention of reminding Rinpoche and listened to him entertain himself for a long time. Chapter 601. Since morning, Rinpoche had been instructing the 2 winged cavalry warriors to paste couplets and the word "Fu" on the door. The Empress was also watching excitedly from behind. "A little more to the left. To the left. Do you know where the left is?" "Zhixiao, what do you think?" Rinpoche turned to look at the Empress. "Heaven lengthens the years, man lengthens the lifespan, and spring fills the universe with fortune. What a good poem. What are the next 2 lines? The Empress praised softly as she recited the couplets on both sides of the door. There's nothing below. Oh, it's a eunuch, the Empress said with slight regret. Rinpoche's expression suddenly became interesting. He wanted to laugh, but he thought that he would most likely be beaten up, so he held it in. The words look good, but there's no essence, chi, and spirit in it. It's low quality. It's not even as good as your words that crawled out of nowhere. The Empress commented again. Thank you for your praise, Your Majesty. Rinpoche looked up at them and said, Put your hands down. Why are you still pressing them? They put their hands down and saw 2 clear palm prints on the couplets. They were completely imprinted on the inside of the door, and they were at least 1 centimeter deep. Rinpoche's mouth twitched as he chased them into the house. After entering the house, Papa Rin went out to check if the couplets were crooked. After a while he came back with a complicated look on his face. He looked at the 2 winged cavalry warriors as if they were livestock. Every month, Rinpoche's parents and Rinwanyin would receive the meat that Rinpoche brought back from the other world. Compared to their hard work, the speed of their cultivation was considered very fast. Even compared to those who practiced martial arts in the military, their speed wasn't slow. After a year their strength had increased a lot. Mama Rin didn't even pant when she carried 50 kilograms of rice upstairs. However, looking at the deep palm prints on the door, he still felt that they were livestock. In particular, they weren't made with a single slap. There wasn't any sound previously, and they were obviously directly pressed down, which was even more terrifying. Even Papa Rin felt that if humans could become so terrifying, the world might really undergo great changes in the future. Papa Rin took the time to chat with Rinpoche during the day, but both of them felt the same. With the rapid advancement of technology and martial arts, no one knew what the world would become in the future. Papa Rin wasn't too worried about himself. After all, these changes wouldn't happen overnight and he was already old. He was just a little worried about Rinpoche and Rinwanyin's future. Don't worry about me. I have money and power. No matter what happens, I won't lose out. Rinpoche saw through his father's thoughts, waved his hand and smiled. Rich and powerful? Papa Rin scoffed. How can you be considered rich and powerful with that little bit of money? In the eyes of the common people it was fine, but in the eyes of the truly rich and powerful, it was nothing. In the past, it would at most be considered a humble family. Father, do you have some kind of misunderstanding about the poor? Do you have some kind of misunderstanding about the poor? Do you think ordinary people are poor? Ordinary people couldn't even be considered poor. The commoners were also called the commoners, which corresponded to the landowning families. Only those who had the prestige of a county could be called a soldier, and those who had the prestige of a county could only be called a squire or a commoner. In the past, a prefecture was about the size of a province. A county was now an ordinary prefecture-level city. To have enough prestige in an ordinary prefecture-level city and have a considerable say in a city, even if one wasn't the richest person in the city, it wasn't far off. How much was the richest man in a city worth? Let's not talk about anything else. Do you know about the Xiao clan? It's at least 10 billion yuan. What's that little bit of money? Furthermore, you haven't even passed the 3rd generation. Saying that you are from a humble family is already flattering you. Papa Ren's rebuke made Rinpoche's face turn black. Following which, he looked puzzled and asked, Is this what a humble family means? Ignorant and incompetent thing, do you think you are from a humble family just because you don't wear warm clothes in winter? Papa Rin rebuked Rinpoche and was immediately in a good mood. It had been a long time since he established his prestige like this. Stop showing off what you have. Your father has been learning from you ever since and is now fascinated by classical culture. He studies it all day long. Mama Rin stuck her head out from the kitchen and exposed Papa Rin. One is never too old to learn. Papa Rin didn't mind at all. At least he could still teach his son a lesson. Lady Boss will be a member of the imperial family in the future. How can she be from a humble family? The 2 winged cavalry warriors grinned. Lady Boss? Imperial family? Papa Rin opened his mouth and subconsciously looked at the Empress. Seeing that she was calm and had no intention of refuting, he didn't know whether she heard it or not. However, imperial family. Could this daughter-in-law be a relative of one of the higher-ups? Papa Ren's mind spun and was immediately shocked. He glanced at the Empress again and felt that it was more likely. Based on the aura of this daughter-in-law, how could she be raised by an ordinary family? Furthermore, Rinpoche's 2 subordinates were obviously not ordinary people. How could they be ordinary people who could directly leave 4 fingerprints on the security door? Where did Ren Baqin get such subordinates from? Could he hire such subordinates with that little bit of money? Who was he trying to fool? Where did these subordinates come from? It was terrifying to think about it. Papa Ren's face first turned pale, then green and finally black. He jumped up and walked into the house. What's wrong? Ren Baqin was shocked when he saw his father's facial expression changing rapidly. Ren Baqin didn't know what was going through his father's mind. I'm going to eat a bottle of 6-flavor Rehmannia pills to calm myself down, Papa Ren said without looking back. Pfft. Ren Baqin immediately spurted out his drink. When Papa Ren came back, he didn't mention anything about the poor family anymore and acted as if nothing had happened. The moment he opened his mouth, he would talk about how wise the current leader was. When he closed his mouth, he would talk about how good the current development situation was and how it was all thanks to the leadership of the party. It was only then that he realized what his father had imagined. However, those 2 winged cavalry warriors weren't wrong. They were indeed from the imperial family, but it was different from what his father thought. After thinking about it, Ren Baqin pulled his father aside and said, Zixiao's identity is special. It's not what you think. Special? I understand. I can't tell you about this. Don't worry, I've eaten more salt than you've eaten rice. How can I not understand? Papa Ren had a look of understanding on his face. Then he pondered deeply. If Zixiao was only outstanding and had an outstanding family background, it would be fine. However, since she had connections with the higher-ups, it would be troublesome. Could he still see her as his daughter-in-law? Was it really okay for her to be with his son? Ren Baqin looked at his expression and was speechless. You really don't understand. She has nothing to do with the higher-ups. Papa Ren immediately understood. So it wasn't the higher-ups but the next empress? Had the next empress already been decided? Alright, I know what you're up to. It's just that I can't interfere in your matters. Pay more attention. Papa Ren shook his head. Ren Baqin realized that if he didn't explain clearly, his father wouldn't understand. However, could he explain the empress's identity? Oh, the empress of another world? Forget it. Ren Baqin thought about it and decided not to explain. The more he explained, the worse it would be. For the rest of the afternoon, his father didn't show any signs of abnormality. In fact, he didn't even mention anything about Mama Ren. He was the only one who was worried from time to time. At around 7 o'clock in the evening, Ren Baqin dragged the empress and the 2 winged cavalry warriors downstairs. Ren Wanyin followed them. When they arrived downstairs, there were already 2 SUVs and a half-built truck waiting there. The truck was wrapped tightly with canvas. Brother, why are you being so secretive? Ren Wanyin looked at his brother, then at the 2 bears, and then at his sister-in-law. They were all wearing thin clothing and didn't feel cold at all in this minus 20 degrees Celsius weather. He was the only one who was wrapped up tightly. When he pulled down the zipper of the truck, he felt a gust of cold wind blowing in. He shivered and quickly pulled the zipper back. Let's set off the fireworks. Ren Baqin called out and got into the truck. The group drove for 20 minutes to the suburbs, found an empty space and untied the canvas. Sure enough, the truck was loaded with all kinds of fireworks. Not long after, the first firework bloomed in the sky. Then more fireworks rose into the sky. The empress looked up at the fireworks. The flickering light reflected on her face, and her face was full of serenity and gentleness. Ren Baqin reached out and held the empress's hand tightly. The 2 of them stood shoulder to shoulder. Are you cold? Ren Baqin asked softly as he looked at Ren Wanyin and the 2 winged cavalry warriors who were happily setting off fireworks in the distance. As long as the empress said that she was cold, he would be able to hug her justifiably. I'm not cold. Oh, but I'm so cold. Your Majesty, please hug me. Ren Baqin said with a smile and waited for the incoming kick. He was already mentally prepared for a close encounter with the snow. However, the empress hugged him from behind, placed her chin on his shoulder and asked softly, Are you warm? Very warm. Ren Baqin smiled and held the empress's hands that were wrapped in front of him. In the distance, 2 winged cavalry warriors inadvertently raised their heads and saw the empress and Ren Baqin. They then turned their heads away with a peaceful smile on their faces and happily set off fireworks. Chapter 602. Ren Baqin and the empress originally thought that they would enjoy the festive atmosphere and spend 2 leisurely days here. However, it turned out that they were thinking too much. For the past few years, the empress had only heard of her name but never seen her. Furthermore, Mama Ren had praised her to the skies. She had finally shown her face. She was no longer just a breathtaking photo. From the first day of the new year onwards, almost all of Rinpoche's aunts personally visited the Ren family. People were coming and going just like the city gates of Lan City. Nominally they were here to visit. In reality they were here to watch. In the past, they would go to his uncle's house and his two aunts' houses on the 4th and 5th days of the new year. Now everything had changed. After 2 days, Rinpoche couldn't take it anymore and fled with the empress. As for the two winged cavalry warriors, Rinpoche bought plane tickets, threw a bank card with 100,000 yuan, and gave them a stern warning before starting a brand new winged cavalry adventure. The two winged cavalry warriors were naturally overjoyed. They had heard those two fools bragging for a year and now it was finally their turn. They felt that they would be letting down their conscience if they didn't do something exciting. Unlike the previous two, the goal of these two wasn't to return to Shanghai. Rinpoche naturally didn't know what kind of trouble they would create for him. At this moment he was squatting. After finding a place to squat, he and the empress returned to Dayo. This time they stayed for 5 days and there wasn't much time left. When he finished relaxing and wiped his butt with a piece of tissue, his expression changed drastically. He actually felt a meatball through the tissue, and it was very painful. Could this be the legendary hemorrhoids? Could it be that he would become a person with hemorrhoids in the future? Rinpoche shuddered at the thought of such a future. Although 9 out of 10 men and 10 out of 10 women had hemorrhoids, Rinpoche had always been smiling. When his college roommates used potassium permanganate to wash their buttocks every night, he always had a kind smile on his face. However, when this happened to him, he was completely dumbfounded. How did he get such a painful illness that made him feel restless and doubt his life? Who had ever seen an expert get hemorrhoids? Imagine if Qiao Feng suddenly had a hemorrhoid attack at the Virtuous Manor. Thinking back to the sword duel on Mount Hua, many experts had twisted their way up to the peak of Mount Hua with their chrysanthemums between their legs. The final battle at the peak of Mount Hua, and then each of them had to find a place to apply hemorrhoid cream. Thinking about it, Xiao Yan covered his buttocks and said with a twisted face, "Don't bully a young man for being poor." Thinking back to when Han Pao Pao had fought alongside Nangong Wan in the cave against the evil flood dragon. Then he had shouted, "Help me hold off for 5 minutes." Then he had run behind Nangong Wan to find a place to take off his pants and apply some hemorrhoid medicine. For example, during the final battle between Wang Chao and God, the blood in his body surged as he hammered repeatedly, causing his lower body to spurt out blood. Was the plot still watchable? Why did it become like this when it was his turn? Rinpoche's heart crumbled. Ever since he put on his pants, the pain in his butthole had been continuous. When he stretched his legs and walked out of the toilet with a deathly pale face, the empress was waiting for him in the distance. The two of them were in a restaurant. They originally planned to eat something, go to the toilet and then find a place to go back. They didn't expect such a huge unforeseen event to happen. It was practically an apocalyptic disaster. "What's wrong?" the empress asked faintly when she saw that he didn't look well. "Nothing." Rinpoche's lips trembled. He couldn't possibly tell the empress that his butthole had bloomed, right? He couldn't say it. "Go back?" The empress didn't ask when she saw that he wasn't going to say it. "I can't go back. I have to check something." Rinpoche looked like he was about to cry. He quickly checked the map and walked forward with his legs splayed. He didn't dare to take more than 30 centimeters of a step. He didn't dare to take bigger steps because it hurt. "Pharmacy. Minglong. Pharmacy. Minglong." Rinpoche nervously looked at the map on his phone and searched for the pharmacy that wasn't far ahead. He had never felt that time was so important. In the past, he would finish all kinds of things 2 to 3 hours in advance and then wait to travel between worlds. Now he could go back at any time. He might only have 1 minute left, 10 minutes, or even half an hour left. This was because he had never calculated time so accurately before. He had to race against time to buy hemorrhoid ointment from the pharmacy. He didn't even have time to go online to learn how to treat hemorrhoids. When he saw the pharmacy that he was looking for appear on the roadside a dozen meters ahead, he finally revealed an excited expression. He turned to look at the empress and saw that she was silently following behind him. Seeing that Rinpoche had turned around, the empress looked at him with a puzzled expression and asked, "Why are you walking so strangely? Are you injured? What happened?" Rinpoche squeezed out a dry smile and replied, "It's a small problem that will be solved soon." Following Rinpoche's words, the air around him began to fluctuate rhythmically. The empress immediately grabbed onto Rinpoche's arm. When Rinpoche realized that the scenery in front of him had changed, his face immediately changed. He didn't make it in time. He actually didn't buy hemorrhoid ointment. What exactly happened? The Empress squinted her eyes and asked. It's really nothing serious. Your Majesty, you don't have to worry. Rinpoche replied with a green face. Why is it so strange all of a sudden? The Empress was puzzled. Rinpoche was fine just a moment ago, but he became like this after going to the toilet. It wasn't easy for him to fool the Empress. After bidding farewell, Rinpoche walked back to where he came from. He wondered if there was a disease like hemorrhoids in this world. He wondered if the doctors would be able to treat it. After thinking about it, Rinpoche wasn't sure. Looking at the guards behind him, Rinpoche gritted his teeth and asked, Sure who? Let me ask you something. Principal, what's the matter? Sure who took 2 steps forward and asked. Do you know what hemorrhoids are? Rinpoche looked embarrassed. I only know arrow sores. Sure whose face darkened. Then do you know that the chrysanthemum is sick? What kind of flower is chrysanthemum? Forget it. It's fine. Rinpoche sighed. When he returned to his room, he lay on the bed and started to toss and turn restlessly. It hurts. Tonight, he discovered many problems that he had never paid attention to before. For example, there were always people who said that the chrysanthemum would tighten. When would the chrysanthemum tighten? Rinpoche had never paid attention to it before, but now he knew that it would happen when the chrysanthemum was loosening. Not only would it tighten once, but it would also tighten twice and thrice. Every time the chrysanthemum tightened, that feeling, that sour feeling, made Rinpoche feel so much pain that he wanted to die. For example, coughing. Rinpoche had never thought that the chrysanthemum would actually tighten when coughing. For example, when he stood up, did anyone know that the chrysanthemum would also tighten when standing up? This night, Rinpoche experienced all of them. That night he was half asleep and half awake. The next day he woke up late, which was rare. He immediately asked the guards to give the students a day off. He felt that he had to go to the doctor's office. Chapter 603. Change a carriage. Rinpoche looked at the 4-corned cow that the guards brought over and hesitated for a while, but he didn't have the courage to climb up. In the end, they switched to a large 4-wheeled ox cart and left the palace in a grandiose manner, heading towards the clinic. Rinpoche was restless in the carriage. After a long bumpy ride, he finally arrived near the clinic, but the guards in front suddenly stopped. Make way. This is Principal Ren's carriage. Stop glaring and make way. What's going on? Rinpoche lifted the curtain and asked. Sir Tong and Sir Qin's guards are blocking the entrance of the clinic. Oh. Rinpoche didn't expect them to be at the clinic. Fortunately, the carriage continued to move forward. Rinpoche looked to both sides and saw 5 burly men glaring at him with murderous looks. Obviously, the murderous look wasn't directed at him but at another group of people. Since the relationship between the family heads wasn't good, the guards naturally tried to kill them with their glares. Rinpoche ignored them and had more important matters to attend to. The carriage moved forward a few steps before stopping. Rinpoche carefully got out of the carriage, tried his best to spread his legs, and staggered into the clinic. Sir, which doctor are you looking for? Sure who asked. Rinpoche stood rooted to the ground and pondered. How would he know which doctor to look for? He didn't even know if the clinic could treat this illness. How could he express the question he wanted to ask in a way that the other party could understand and not have too much of a reaction? Then Rinpoche heard Qin Chuan's wild laughter from the courtyard next door. Old man, take a few steps if you have nothing to do. I'm naturally fine. Tong Jingye snorted. Your steps are like those of a great Xia woman. Minister Tong of the Ministry of Works. Ah. Qin Chuan burst into laughter. If you are fine, take a few steps if you have nothing to do. Tong Jingye immediately retorted. I'm naturally fine. Take a few steps. Could it be that you're afraid? Let's go. Why would I be afraid of an ignorant man like you? Then Tong Jingye laughed wildly. Old man, your pants are wet, and you still say you are fine? Aha, Minister Qin of the Ministry of War is actually bleeding? This old man was only hit by 1 arrow. Qin Chuan snorted. An arrow in the buttocks? Tong Jingye's laughter could even be heard from outside the courtyard. Bah, how much better can you be? If you're not convinced, then let's spar. Qin Chuan said angrily. How can you compete in your current state? Tong Jingye continued to burst into laughter. Let's run from here to the city gate and back. Do you dare? Tong Jingye pondered for a moment and said, Why should I compete with an ignorant man like you whose pants are drenched in blood? I'm ashamed to be associated with you. Qin Chuan immediately flew into a rage. Ren Baqin then heard the sound of punches and kicks coming from the courtyard next door. Ren Baqin's face was bright and full of expression. Just now, the conversation between the two of them made him think of a possibility. Could it be that these two old fellows were suffering from hemorrhoids at the same time? Ren Baqin gestured to the guard and tiptoed into the courtyard to take a look. Even though the two of them were punching and kicking, their movements were very strange. It was obvious that they didn't dare to use too much strength and didn't even dare to make any big movements. If they made any big movements, they would grimace in pain. Ren Baqin felt that this possibility was even greater. Looking at their movements, he could imagine what kind of pain they were experiencing. It was simply too familiar. Shut up. The door of a room in the courtyard opened, and an old man with white hair and beard glared at the two of them. Both of you stay there obediently. He didn't seem to care about the status of the two of them. It could be said that there weren't many people in the imperial court who had a higher status than them. Tang Xinye and Qin Chuan immediately stood at the side and stared at each other, but they were very obedient. Principal Ren, you have been watching for a long time. What are you here for? Ren Baqin suddenly heard Qin Chuan's malicious voice. Haha, I just have nothing to do. Ren Baqin laughed and revealed himself as he strolled. Qin Chuan and Tang Xinye immediately focused their attention on Ren Baqin's movements. Speaking of which, I haven't been to this clinic for a long time. The air here is still good. Ren Baqin laughed and turned to leave. He was afraid that these two old bastards would know what was wrong with him. Since they knew which courtyard it was, things would be easy. He could just come back later. Since you are here, just wait there quietly. I don't have the mood to suffer from the same illness several times. The old man in the courtyard glanced at Ren Baqin, observed his walking posture, and then said faintly, I'm really fine. Ren Baqin turned around and smiled. This is actually a misunderstanding. In that case, don't look for me later. I'm going out to gather herbs, the old man immediately said. Ren Baqin thought about it. Was treatment more important or his reputation more important? No matter how he thought about it, he felt that his reputation was more important, but he just couldn't take a step forward. Looking at the old man's attitude toward Tang Xinye and Qin Chuan and their reactions, Ren Baqin really believed that the old man wouldn't care about him. Then the scene became the two people in the courtyard and the one at the door. The three of them stared at each other. I didn't expect both of you to be here at the same time. Ren Baqin laughed and tried to resolve the awkward atmosphere. I also didn't expect Sir Ren to appear here. Qin Chuan's eyes were like copper bells as he laughed mischievously. He still remembered what happened last time. The thing that Ren Baqin took out made him want to die for a period of time. Sir Ren and I have always been fated. Tonight, let's go to Misty Cloud Restaurant and have 3 big bowls of wine. Tang Xinye immediately tried to rope in his comrade. I have booked Misty Cloud Restaurant today. Old man, you should wait for me to leave before drinking the leftovers. Qin Chuan immediately turned his head and sneered. Old man, your buttocks are still bleeding. Do you want to dye Misty Cloud Restaurant with blood? I'm afraid that in the next year, all the brothels in Lan City will spread the story of the Minister of War. Tang Xinye's gaze didn't leave Qin Chuan's lower body like a knife. It's just a small arrow wound. Qin Chuan didn't seem to care. I wonder which expert shot your buttocks with an arrow. I have to treat him to a good drink. Tang Xinye retorted sarcastically. If you have nothing to do, why don't you take a few steps and take a look? Qin Chuan didn't show any mercy with his words. Ren Baqin sighed and watched the two of them bickering. He felt that he was unlucky. Firstly, he was unlucky to have contracted this illness. Secondly, he was unlucky to have met these two fellows. After waiting for the time it took to drink 2 cups of tea, the door to the previous room was opened again. Shi Qing walked out with a refreshed look on his face. So it's the 3 of you. I'll take my leave first. Shi Qing looked at the 3 of them with a strange look, cupped his fists, and walked away with a majestic gait. The 3 of you come in. The old man extended his head and beckoned the 3 of them in. He first reached out and pressed on each of their shoulders before slapping their buttocks. When he saw their eyebrows twitching, he immediately knew that he was right. Take off your clothes, the old man said. Ah. Ren Baqin looked at the other 2 old men. Even though he had been to public bathhouses since he was young, he couldn't face these 2 old men openly in the same room. The 3 of you go inside. The old man pointed inside. Ren Baqin then noticed that there were actually a few areas separated by cloth. The 3 of them each found a place and started to take off their clothes. The old man called out from outside, Zhongqing, bring 3 basins of ice water over. Then he stretched his head to see that the 3 of them were naked and said, stand upside down with both hands on the ground. Rinpoche was now at the mercy of others. He stood upside down with both hands on the ground and muttered in his heart whether this old man was reliable or not. Not long after, someone came in. Then a basin of ice water was poured on Rinpoche's body. Rinpoche's body immediately quivered. It was really ice water. Rinpoche could feel the ice shards hitting his body. The temperature was definitely below 10 degrees Celsius. He immediately let out a strange cry and somersaulted in the air before landing on the ground. Then his heart tightened. However, he realized that the pain he expected didn't come. There was only a very slight pain and it wasn't a big deal. He reached out and touched it. Was gone? Was it all right? It was stimulated by the ice water just now and shrank back. After a while, the 3 of them cupped their fists and expressed their gratitude in a refreshed manner. Before Rinpoche went out, he scanned the ground and found 4 empty basins on the ground. After leaving the courtyard, Tong Jingye waved at Rinpoche with a relaxed expression and said, Sir Rin, that old man is pitiful. I won't fight with him today. Tomorrow I'll treat you to a meal at Yenyun restaurant. Qin Chuan walked over to Tong Jingye in high spirits and called for his followers to ride away. His wild laughter could still be heard from afar. Chapter 604. Where's Rinpoche? The Empress was bored out of her mind and went out for some fresh air. The sky had just darkened, but the palace was brightly lit. He was invited to House Yunyan by Minister Tong. He came to inform Her Majesty just now, Hong Yuan whispered as he followed behind Rinpoche while carrying the Empress's wine pot. Oh. The Empress thought for a while. Rinpoche did come by just now, but she was watching a television drama and didn't pay much attention. After thinking for a while, the Empress said, that old man. He brought him to House Yunyan again. Sir Rin knows his limits. Hong Yuan pursed her lips and smiled. Men are all cats, there's no one who doesn't cheat. The Empress thought of a common saying in television dramas and blurted it out. Your Majesty, do you want to go and take a look? Qing Yuan instigated with a mischievous smile. She actually liked the scene of the Empress tormenting Principal Ren. The Empress, who was walking out, stopped in her tracks and revealed a trace of excitement on her face. However, another saying from television dramas came to mind, don't push men too hard, give them some space. Then another saying came to mind, don't give men the chance to cheat. After struggling for a while, the Empress smiled. Why was she thinking about this? Since when did she have to consider the thoughts of these street kids? I'm Cheesy Xiao. If anyone in this world let me down, I'll hang him on top of the city wall to dry and then suppress him in the palace square to accompany the Eru spirit. I don't think he has the guts, the Empress said coldly. Furthermore, Rinpoche couldn't always be around her in the palace. It wasn't a bad thing for him to interact more with the people from the Ministry of Works. She still trusted Rinpoche. After finishing her sentence, the Empress turned around and walked into the palace. I'm bored. Change into men's clothes and go to the brothel to have some fun. At this moment, Rinpoche had a strange look on his face in House Yunyan. He couldn't tell if it was playful, pitiful, or something else. The hall was full of officials from the Ministry of Works, including Feng Ho and Gui Hong. Even though they weren't unrestrained, they were still dancing like demons. Other than Rinpoche, there was no one on either side of him. He was just drinking and casually chatting with everyone about the recent developments. For example, the blast furnaces and hydraulic forging workshops on the banks of the 19 River in the south, and the promotion of crops such as potatoes and pumpkins in the coming year. He always wanted to look at the development of Dayo's agriculture and industry from a higher perspective so that he could make plans. However, the group of women who came in just now surprised him, because he saw a familiar face among them. She was a young girl in her 20s. She was 28, not 28. His appearance could be considered excellent, with fair skin and a slightly broad forehead. His appearance carried a heroic spirit. After putting on some makeup, she looked much more gentle and charming. He was dressed in the traditional aqua blue clothing of the Jing tribe. There were many flowery embroidery on his clothes, and he wore a few silver rings on his wrists. This batch of women was sent from Tianjing Basin. After Shi Huanya pacified Tianjing Basin, he selected some young women from the relatives of the prisoners and sent them to these brothels in Lan City. As for those in the house of House Yunyan, they were the best of the best. They had just been trained, and today was the first time they were sent out to receive guests. As soon as he entered the house of House Yunyan, he heard about this from Feng Ho, but he didn't pay much attention to it. It wasn't until this batch of women came in that he saw the girl among them that he was stunned for a moment and even suspected if they looked alike. It wasn't until he saw the astonishment, shyness, and hatred in the girl's eyes that he confirmed that it was indeed her. He had forgotten the name, but he remembered the person. Back in the hidden village, apart from the experts from the old sect, there were also some of their disciples. This girl was one of them. If he remembered correctly, her master was an old woman who later invited a spirit wheel expert who used a paper umbrella as a weapon and executed a stunning spear attack. Rinpoche still remembered that the expert's name was Chang Tian. After Chang Tian's death, the old woman disappeared with his corpse, and Rinpoche had forgotten about her. After all, a peak earth wheel expert wasn't worth his attention in that situation. He didn't expect to see her disciple here. "Where's your master?" Rinpoche asked. The girl hesitated for a while, then sighed and said, "Dead." "Why are you here?" What Rinpoche actually wanted to ask was why she was still alive. He had a good impression of the people from the hidden village. At the very least, they were a group of people who bled for their ideals. He would rather hope that the people from the hidden village surrendered or died than to see such a girl fall into a place like a brothel and become a doll. However, when the words were on the tip of his tongue, Rinpoche felt that he shouldn't be so harsh. Not everyone had the opportunity to make such a choice. It wasn't wrong to want to live. "There's actually someone you know." Feng Ho laughed heartily and patted Rinpoche's shoulder. Rinpoche immediately felt the chair beneath him creak. "Do you want to ask me why I didn't die with my master?" The girl raised her eyebrows as if she understood the meaning behind Rinpoche's words. She then said with hatred, "That was what I thought at first, but now I want to live and see how those traitors die and how you all perish." As soon as she said this, the surroundings became quiet. Everyone present looked at her with a faint smile. In Lan City, even spirit wheel experts couldn't leave even if they entered. Moreover, a man wheel expert was no different from an ordinary child. No one cared about her. However, her thoughts determined her fate. The others who had the same status as her all distanced themselves in fear. They lowered their heads and didn't dare to say anything. "I will take her away in a while. I will let you live peacefully and watch." Feng Ho smiled and decided the girl's fate with one sentence. "If you want to live, you shouldn't say such words. Do you still want to die? Or is your heart wavering between living in humiliation and death? You have been trained in House Yunyan for 3 months and still haven't understood. Even after 3 months of training, you still haven't figured it out." Rinpoche shook his head. The girl bit her lip and stared at Rinpoche stubbornly. "Don't take her away. I will handle it." Rinpoche turned his head and said to Feng Ho. If Feng Ho took her away, even if he didn't kill her, he wouldn't let her have an easy time. To these people she wasn't even comparable to a doll. If her legs were to be chopped off and tied up in the courtyard, she might as well be killed. "If Her Majesty finds out, I'm afraid you will be in trouble." Feng Ho laughed. "Her Majesty won't care about such a small matter." Rinpoche waved his hand and asked the guards to take the girl to another room. In one of the rooms, Xing Rong, who was missing an arm and an eye, was sitting. "The principal of Black Bamboo Academy, Rinpoche, is here. This time he wants to take away someone who seems to be an acquaintance," a man with a crippled body said from below. "He is here again?" Xing Rong frowned. "The last time he was here, half of House Yunyan was almost demolished." "Minister Tong again?" After thinking about it, only Tong Jinya was fearless enough to invite him to the brothel. "Yes. He wants the person sure, but he has to leave the money behind. Get someone to tell him that it's 500 taels of silver," Xing Rong said after some thought. After a while, someone came in and reported, "Just now 3 women dressed as men came and one of them looks like Her Majesty." Xing Rong's face darkened when he heard this. Why is Her Majesty here again? Chapter 605. Xing Rong thought for a while and said, "Regardless of whether she is Her Majesty or not, treat her as an ordinary guest." He was almost certain that the other party was Her Majesty. The last time Rinpoche came to House Yunyan, it was Her Majesty who came to make trouble. This time, Rinpoche was followed by a woman dressed as a man who looked like Her Majesty. There was no doubt about it. They want to go to House Yunyan. Let them go. Let them go wherever they want to go. After a while, another report came in and said, they chose the upper hall next to Minister Tong. They also want girls. Xing Rong stroked his head with his remaining hand and said, Serve them good wine and food. Also, find a few girls who know etiquette and propriety. After his subordinate left, Xing Rong sighed. He was exhausted. He wasn't tired at first, but now he was. Sir, Minister Qin has brought some people to House Yunyan and wants to go to the Cloud Hall next to Minister Tong, someone reported shortly after. Xing Rong rubbed his nose. Normally he wouldn't be willing to go because Qin Xuan and Tong Jingye would definitely fight if they met. However, it didn't matter today. There was someone more powerful upstairs. As long as he didn't anger that person, the others could do whatever they wanted. Ren Baqin didn't care anymore after sending someone to take the girl away. Whether she lived or died in the future, it was better than leaving her here. Even if she was killed, it would be straightforward. After all, with her identity and the things that her master had been working hard for, he didn't want to see her being treated like this here. Even though he didn't even remember her name. This matter was only a small interlude, so it naturally wouldn't be taken seriously by everyone present. Sir Ren, drink. You and I are fated to meet each other at the doctor's office and have the same illness. Tong Jingye laughed and poured wine for Ren Baqin. Ren Baqian's face darkened. Could he not mention this? It was painful to think about it. Sir Tong and Sir Ren are sick? Feng Ho raised his head and asked with a smile while carrying a girl in his arms. It's nothing. It's just a small problem, Ren Baqin quickly replied. He was afraid of being questioned, but he couldn't say it because it was too embarrassing. Fortunately, Tong Jingye didn't seem to want to publicize this matter, so he kept quiet. Drink. After 3 rounds of wine, Gui Hong pushed Feng Ho away and moved closer to Ren Baqin. Sir Ren, when are you going to take out the cotton that you mentioned previously? Dayo doesn't lack fabric to ward off the cold. Even though cotton can be woven, it's not as important as filling one's stomach. At the very least, Dayo doesn't have to worry about food before we talk about cotton. Ren Baqin shook his head. That's true, but Sir Ren, don't forget that even though you don't need to keep out the cold, it's still very hot to wear a leather coat. Many people have heat rashes, especially the Aborigines. If they could have cheap cloth, that would be great, and it would also be of great benefit to the common people. A few days ago, the potatoes, pumpkins, and sweet potatoes were also harvested. Today was the 3rd harvest, and the total harvest of the 3 was more than 10 million caddies. Right now, they are being transported everywhere. This old man has already given the order that every city must plant the crops according to the requirements. Once the crops are harvested, it will be 100 times, 1,000 times more. This plant could be planted 3 times a year. Even if a portion of it was used for food and the rest was distributed to be planted, there would be no need to worry about food shortage after a year. Sir Ren can take out the cotton for breeding and cultivation first. Gui Hong explained to Ren Baqin clearly. He had all these things in mind and he had finally caught Ren Baqin. If that's the case, wait for a few days. I will bring the cotton seeds and the planting method over, Ren Baqin said after some thought. What about the method of making wine? After Ren Baqin finished speaking, Tong Jingye immediately put his arm around Ren Baqin's shoulder and almost pulled him into his embrace. Ren Baqin quickly shrunk back and escaped. Don't think about the method of making wine for now. It won't be too late to talk about it when the imperial family has enough food to make wine at will, Ren Baqin immediately said. That ballista made of springs last time isn't bad either. Feng Ho looked over. Ren Baqin's face darkened. It wasn't easy to drink with them. Don't even think about it. Even if I told you, you wouldn't be able to make it, and even if you did, you wouldn't be able to use it. Moreover, the front line is doing well now. Under the command of the walkie-talkie, the soldiers are moving like water, gathering and dispersing at will. Regardless of whether it's a long-range attack or a sudden attack, they can catch the enemy off guard. In terms of individual strength, the Aboriginals are much stronger than the soldiers of the Yun Nation, so we have a huge advantage. Making a bunch of ballistas will instead slow down the speed of the army. If Sir Ren can take out the method of making that small ball, then we don't have to worry about this anymore. Feng Ho laughed. The Ministry of Works had been coveting the method of making grenades for a long time. Unfortunately, Ren Baqin had already said that it couldn't be made. They still believed what he said. Have you found the rubber that I want? Ren Baqin turned his head and looked over. I have news that there is something similar to what you mentioned near the border of the Qin Nation. I have already sent someone to retrieve it. However, even with Her Majesty's order, you can't monopolize this thing, Tong Jingye said. This thing is very useful. Let's see if it meets the requirements first. If it's the kind that I want, it can make a lot of useful things, Ren Baqin said. Rubber had a wide range of uses, and it wasn't only used for hot air balloons. It could be used for sealing, shock absorption, manufacturing, and many other things. Regardless of its usefulness or value, it could be said to be huge. When the time came, it would be a small matter to give some things to the Ministry of Works. For example, rubber tires and shock absorption for carriages. Although these things could make money, they weren't important to him. However, they were very useful to the Ministry of Works and could be handed over. He could also use rubber as an insulator to wrap the electric wires. As long as there were electric wires, more aspects could be put on the agenda. Good. Principal Ren is indeed not a stingy person. Tong Jingye immediately laughed. As long as it was something that Rinpoche had, it would be very useful. Good job, Sir Qin. Give us another jar. Suddenly, a burst of laughter and jeering came from next door. Tong Jingye's laughter immediately stopped and his eyebrows raised. It's Lian Liang from the Department of War, Feng Ho said as his ears twitched. Let's drink and ignore them. Tong Jingye's expression relaxed slightly. He could naturally tell that it was someone from the Ministry of War. However, he had important matters to discuss today and wasn't in the mood to care about them. In fact, Tong Jingye wanted to ask Rinpoche about those street lamps in the palace, but Her Majesty didn't explain. The officials were speculating non-stop, and someone had to come out and say something. Although they could suppress it, they couldn't suppress the situation for a while. Even the ministers of the 6 ministries had some complaints. In other words, on account of their past friendship, he wanted to warn Rinpoche. No matter what, he shouldn't let Her Majesty be too extravagant. This way Rinpoche could stand firm. Otherwise, no matter how much Her Majesty liked him, there would be trouble sooner or later if she criticized him too much. How did the Hao nation fall back then? Why did the Aboriginals rebel? If it weren't for the Hao nation's emperor's extravagance and dissipation, would there have been such a thing? These people hadn't forgotten. This was his main purpose this time. Bang, bang, bang. The sound of someone smashing the wall came from next door, causing Tong Jingye's eyes to bulge like copper bells. His eyes were overflowing with murderous intent. Chapter 606. Ha, Sir Qin is still as good as ever. I'll let you see if my knife is still sharp. The wild laughter from next door caused the entire House Yunyan to tremble. In particular, he didn't know which bastard was laughing maniacally and hammering the wall. Rinpoche watched as the dust from the beam fell into his cup. Tong Jingye's face darkened at first, then he restrained himself and shouted, "Drink, chop people with a big knife, drink in big mouthfuls and sing loudly. This is what an Aboriginal man should be like." Sir Tong is right. Feng Ho was the first to respond. He was practically shouting at the top of his lungs. Then the voices in the hall suddenly became louder. Gui Hong was banging on the table, and Rinpoche saw that the stone slabs under the table had cracked. The entire room was filled with the cries of a few boorish men, and even the voices of the women couldn't be heard. The voices from next door first stopped, then suddenly became enthusiastic, once again suppressing the voices of Tong Jingye and the others. How could Tong Jingye tolerate this? His expression didn't change and his voice was raised again. Ha ha ha. The voices of the people from the Ministry of Works increased by 5 decibels. Ha! The voices of the people from the Ministry of War increased by 5 decibels. Ha! The voices of the people from the Ministry of War increased by 5 decibels. Ha! The voices of the people from the Ministry of War increased again. In less than half an hour, the entire House Yunyan was filled with people from the 2 rooms competing with each other in volume. Rinpoche covered his ears and looked at Tong Jingye with a flushed face as he laughed wildly, at the top of his lungs. The veins on his neck were popping out. "And Gui Hong, your voice is already broken. Your voice is like a broken gong. You're about to suffocate, yet you're still laughing? I'm really worried that you'll fall down in the next second. Feng Ho, can you stop hammering the wall? Can't you see that the wall is already cracked? If you continue hammering, House Yunyan will probably become a thing of the past. That would really be worthy of its name." The people on the entire street outside were looking in the direction of House Yunyan. The voices from House Yunyan almost covered half the street, and people in other places had to shout at the top of their lungs. Otherwise they wouldn't be able to hear it in one room. Then after asking around they found out that Qin Chuan and Tong Jingye were inside. All of them looked embarrassed. They didn't know when these 2 lords would stop when they met. Xing Rong got up and pushed open the window. The moonlight outside the window spilled into the room that was always dark, followed by the noise from House Yunyan. "Sir, those 2 are fighting again," someone behind him said. Let them be, Xingrong said indifferently. If it was in the past, he would naturally think of a way, but there was no need for that today. Next to Rinpochen, the empress, who was dressed in black and had her hair combed into a great Xia scholar's bun, had a gloomy expression on her face. Initially, going to a brothel was something new. However, not long after she sat down, she heard a commotion from next door. Then the commotion got louder and louder. Both parties seemed to be competing to see who had the loudest voice. It was simply demonic, causing the corners of her eyes to twitch. Subconsciously, she grabbed the table with her fingers and sent sawdust flying. She couldn't wait to jump out and give each of them a kick. However, after thinking that she was seeking pleasure and visiting incognito, the empress endured it. However, her expression remained very ugly. Beside the empress, there were two smiling ladies with outstanding temperaments accompanying her. However, the two of them couldn't smile anymore. They wanted to cover their ears a few times, but they didn't dare to. Not far from the empress, Qin Yuan and Hong Luan, who were dressed up as charming young men, had been taking advantage of the young lady beside them ever since they entered the room. That young lady didn't seem to mind. Instead, her eyes were filled with amusement. Even without a discerning eye, one could tell that these three charming young men were women dressed up as men. In Lan City, when one opened the window and looked into the room, one would see burly men everywhere. Where did these three charming young men come from? In particular, these two smelled of cosmetics. At this moment, Qin Yuan stopped her groping, turned to the empress and said, "Young master, it's too noisy." The empress raised her eyebrows and used her eyes to ask, "What are you talking about?" Qin Yuan replied, "It's too noisy." The empress replied, "I can't hear you." Hong Luan looked at the two of them and asked, "What are you talking about?" The empress and Qin Yuan looked at Hong Luan and used their eyes to ask, "What did you say?" Boom. The wall that had been continuously destroyed by Feng Ho was finally broken. The people at the two tables in the two halls looked at each other. "So, it's the old man here," Tong Jingye and Qin Xuan said in unison. "Old man, who are you talking about?" Tong Jingye repeated the same trick. "Old man, you." As usual, Qin Xuan stepped into the same pit. "I was wondering why it's so smelly today. Old man, are you here to stain House Yunyan with blood?" Tong Jingye laughed wildly. One had to hit someone's face and scold someone's shortcomings. It's better than a woman like you who walks with your buttocks between your legs. Qin Xuan stood up and looked at Tong Jingye. "Come here, I'll let you see who's the woman." "Why, do you want to try the sharpness of my knife again?" "Good, good, good. It just so happens that I've made some progress recently and want to see if you have made any progress." Tong Jingye slammed the table in front of him, which immediately shattered. Before Tong Jingye raised his hand, Rinpochen snatched a plate of peanut-like dried fruits and hid in a corner, eating peanuts while waiting to watch the show. As for the others, they stared at each other and used their gazes to kill each other. Whenever Tong Jingye and Qin Xuan met, they would act like this. It was as if they were fighting cocks, and the relationship between the two departments wasn't good. "Come, I'm afraid of breaking things if we fight here. Let's go to the roof and have a spar." Tong Jingye ignored the smashed walls and tables and forgot what he wanted to say to Rinpochen. He and Qin Xuan ran to the roof to fight. After the two of them left, the others followed them to the roof. Rinpochen looked left and right, then out of the window. It was 3 stories high and there was no place for him to stand on. He couldn't go up. To be a spectator, one had to be skilled. Otherwise, they wouldn't even have a chance to watch. "Shihu!" Rinpochen shouted. Shihu, who was waiting outside, immediately came in, carried Rinpochen to the roof and put him down. Rinpochen's drunkenness was blown away by the wind, and he felt even more dizzy. The so-called feeling of sobering up after being blown away by the wind was nonsense. There was a saying that went, "You'll faint when you see the wind." Rinpochen shook his head. Just as he composed himself and tried to find where the two of them were, he heard a loud boom. The two of them broke the roof and fought to the ground below. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. A group of figures flashed past. Rinpochen and Shi, who were the only ones left on the roof, enjoying the cold wind with the plate of peanuts in his arms. Awkward, he had just come up but the other party had already gone down. How awkward was this? Rinpochen simply lay on the roof, enjoying the night wind, and looked at the moon above his head. "Shihu, don't you think that thing on the big moon looks like an eye?" Rinpochen asked drunkenly after looking at it for a long time. At this time there was a red moon and a much smaller moon hanging high in the sky. In the center of the red moon, there was something that looked like an eye, as if it was watching everyone who was looking at the sky. However, this wasn't something that could be seen all the time. The last time Rinpoche saw it was a long time ago, and he had forgotten about it after not seeing it again. Now he suddenly saw it again on this night. Boom. Boom. Tong Jingye and Qin Xuan suddenly flew out of the house Yunyan and disappeared into the night. The entire house Yunyan was shaking and creaking as if it was about to collapse. "Sir, be careful." Shi Hu's expression suddenly changed. He grabbed Rinpoche and was about to run. Boom. Crash. House Yunyan let out a creaking sound that made people's teeth ache and suddenly collapsed. After a cloud of dust, the people from the Ministry of Works and the Ministry of War landed in the courtyard obediently. "Your Majesty." Just now, when Tong Jingye and Qin Xuan were fighting, they broke through the wall and went into another hall. When they saw the few people in the hall, everyone was dumbfounded. No one expected the Empress to be here. The Empress's face darkened as she kicked each of them out. Looking at the crowd at this moment, the Empress snorted and disappeared into the moonlight in a flash. After the Empress left, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. "Why is Her Majesty here?" Feng Ho sighed. "To catch an adulterous couple." Gu Yihong hit the nail on the head. "Where's Principal Ren?" "I didn't see him." "Don't tell me he saw Her Majesty hiding?" "I'm here." Ren Bachien crawled out of the ruins with his face covered in dirt. It was still the same room. "Sir, House Yunyan has collapsed. Send the bill to the Tong and Qin residences tomorrow." "It was Her Majesty who demolished it." "Send the bill to the Tong and Qin residences tomorrow." "Got it." After his subordinates retreated, Xing Rong sighed and felt tired. He would have rather been wielding a knife and chopping people in the Protectorate of the North. Unfortunately, Xing Rong touched his remaining eye and looked at his only hand, which was missing 2 fingers. Chapter 607. I heard that you asked for a woman from a brothel? Do you want to learn how to keep a mistress in your house? The Empress asked casually the next day. Your Majesty is well informed. Ren Baqin gave her a thumbs up and praised her. The Empress glanced at him. How was this well informed? The people from the hidden village felt that she shouldn't be in a place like a brothel. I sent someone to send her to Qingyun Sword. That's why I said that you are keeping a mistress in your house. You deliberately sent her to a place that's neither too far nor too close, and I can't be bothered with her, the Empress said. Ren Baqin didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Your Majesty, you have been watching too much television. She was buried in House Yunyan last night. There are several wounds on her face and I'm afraid that she is disfigured. How can I keep a mistress in my house? You still can't forget her even though she is disfigured. I didn't misjudge you. You don't just look at a person's appearance. The Empress continued. Ren Baqin was speechless. Your Majesty, are you praising me? Also, you aren't going to reason with me today, right? Ren Baqin felt that the ancient saying, reasoning with a woman is stupid. This saying was simply too reasonable. But why did your Majesty go to House Yunyan? Ren Baqin still didn't remember that he was buried in House Yunyan yesterday because the Empress kicked Qin Xuan and Tong Jingye away and then destroyed the pillars of House Yunyan. I want to know why that place is so attractive to you, the Empress said casually. How is it attractive? I was just accompanying Minister Tong to drink and chat. However, I'm curious, what conclusion did your Majesty reach? New people are better than old clothes. The Empress sighed softly. Ren Baqin immediately felt embarrassed. Your Majesty, you are indeed here to find trouble today. Also, is it appropriate to say such words with such a cold and aloof face? Your Majesty, even if you want to pretend to be a resentful woman, you don't look like one. He immediately cautiously said, Your Majesty, let's watch less television in the future and deal more with court affairs. The Empress immediately raised her eyebrows and squinted at him. You will get beaten up. Your Majesty, violence can't solve any problems. Ren Baqin said righteously. But it can solve the problem of the person. The Empress sneered. Ren Baqin thought about it and sighed. Your Majesty, you are right. The Water Empress was satisfied. She glanced at him and said softly, If you can defeat me, I will listen to you. Then he became cold again. But you can't beat me, so listen to me. Ren Baqin, what can I say? Your Majesty is far-sighted and wise. You can see through the surface and see the core. You are indeed extraordinary. Cut it out. The Empress snorted softly. It was quite fun to bully Ren Baqin when he had nothing to do. Then he got down to business. The auxiliary troops have already started to head back and have just left the Yun nation. This time they brought back a lot of things they had plundered from various cities. There was also a batch of captives, about 100,000 people. It is estimated that we will reach Lan City in a month. Rinpoche's spirits were lifted. The Aboriginals weren't like the other nations or ancient China. They didn't have auxiliary armies. The auxiliary army that the Empress mentioned was the militia. Previously, many militias were transferred from various cities to the Yun nation to transport the looted supplies after the city was breached. These supplies were used to transfuse Dayo's blood with Dayo. These were the supplies that were being transported this time. At the same time, the large batch of captives was also very important, especially for the expansion of the cement and brick factories, as well as the construction of roads. I will discuss this with Sir Tong. Go and meet Tuan. The provisions that these people need will also have to be transported from the Ministry of Revenue, the Empress said. Understood. Rinpoche nodded. In the past, the Empress would directly issue orders for such matters, but now she was letting Rinpoche coordinate it himself. This was probably a change. Although it seemed more troublesome, it also meant that Rinpoche wasn't completely relying on the Empress anymore. That day Rinpoche wasn't in a hurry to do anything and first went back to Earth. The others were in the villa, and only the 2 winged cavalry warriors hadn't returned yet. It had been 12 days and even the Lantern Festival was almost over. There were still no traces of these 2 people. Rinpoche called Yang Sen and calmly asked, Minister Yang, 2 of my subordinates have gone missing. Have you found them? Yang Sen had been waiting for this call, but he almost vomited blood when he heard the content of the call. Your subordinates are missing? Have we found them? Who would dare to find your bear-like subordinates? Also, why did you look for us first when you lost your subordinates? Why do you lose your subordinates every year? Do you think this is a kindergarten? Yang Sen gritted his teeth and asked. Haha, I'm just afraid of causing you trouble. Rinpoche laughed. If you don't want to cause us trouble, don't let your people run around. Yang Sen gulped down his tea on the other end of the call. After the call, Rinpoche was a little speechless. The last time, the 2 winged cavalry warriors went to 3rd Fatty's place. This time, the 2 winged cavalry warriors seemed to have studied the route in advance. They actually followed the previous route and ran all the way to Nan Dynasty. Then there was still chaos along the way. The last time, the 2 winged cavalry warriors destroyed a few drug dens and baths, causing the entire city to be wiped out by the police. Those who were lucky enough to escape weren't able to escape this time. After being tossed around by the winged cavalry and then being wiped out by the police, the 3 cities along the route were really cleaned up. When Rinpoche made the call, Yang Sen was also having a headache because the 2 winged cavalry warriors were wanted by the police in Nan Dynasty and were on the run. Even if Rinpoche didn't make the call, Yang Sen had to find a way to get these 2 people back. The nation would never allow them to fall into foreign hands. After all, the stakes were too high. Even a little bit of information would be a huge loss. However, these 2 people weren't dolls and wouldn't be manipulated by others. The personnel outside tried to contact them several times, but they couldn't even touch their shadows. With the strength of the winged cavalry warriors and their understanding of Earth over the past year, it was like fish in the sea when they were scattered into the city. It was really too difficult to catch them. As a last resort, Rinpoche sent 2 more people to Yang Sen to help bring the 2 people back. Rinpoche personally sent the 2 winged cavalry warriors to the Messier 87 department and replaced them with 2 more. Of course, he couldn't let go of such an opportunity to go out and broaden his horizons. Rinpoche tried his best to let each of the winged cavalry warriors have a better understanding of Earth. If they were still at the novice learning stage in the past, they should be out of the novice village now. Director Yang, I'll have to trouble you this time. These 2 people will follow you. With them around, you should be able to find those 2 people, Rinpoche said as he brought the 2 people to the Messier 87 department. He was very confident that these winged cavalry warriors had lived together for a long time and had a good understanding of other people's thoughts and habits. Furthermore, these 2 were good at tracking in the mountains. Although the mountains weren't quite the same as the cities, there were certain similarities. Xiongzhan. Xionging. Rinpoche said. Lady boss, what's the matter? The 2 men who were 1.8 meters tall and weighed more than 150 kilograms, had ferocious faces, but looked somewhat similar and were laughing and joking. The next second, Rinpoche's foot landed on their legs. It's second boss. Do whatever others say these days. Don't get into trouble and bring those 2 bastards back. Rinpoche said. Although he knew that these 2 definitely wouldn't behave themselves, he still had to put on an act. Chapter 608. We'll set off tomorrow morning. I'll arrange a room for you to rest later. If you have any requests, feel free to let me know. After Rinpoche left, Yang Sen looked at the two burly men in front of him. Even though this wasn't his first time seeing them, Yang Sen could still feel the pressure from them. It wasn't because of their identities but because of their strength. Just like ordinary people facing tigers and other wild beasts at close range, they would always be somewhat frightened. However, Yang Sen concealed it very well and no one could see it. Can I let you know if I have any requests? Xiongzhan looked down at Yang Sen, who was sitting behind the table. Yes, as long as it's within my capabilities. Yang Sen smiled. He actually hoped to build a good relationship with these people. Although it seemed very difficult at the moment, there was always a way. Xiongzhan and Xionging looked at each other and laughed. You're a good person. Of course. Yang Sen smiled. Do you have women? Xiongzhan asked. What? Yang Sen was stunned. Women. I haven't seen a woman for more than a year. Xiongzhan said seriously. Yang Sen's face darkened. You're really impolite. I really don't have that. Not even a woman. Xiongzhan and Xionging were a little disappointed. Yang Sen's face darkened even more. What do you think I am? A pimp? I'm a civil servant after all. That white powder that makes you feel like you're walking on clouds after inhaling it. Do you have that? The two of them lowered their demands and looked at Yang Sen with bright eyes. Those two idiots were fooled like this last time, but it was completely useless. Later on, they heard from Ding Jie that there was such a thing, and they thought that if they tasted it they could go back and show it off. Not either. Yang Sen's face twitched. You want women and poison. What else do you want? Not even this? The two of them didn't hide their disdain. If you don't have this and that, what else do you want us to mention? Yang Sen was completely speechless. Did I ask you to mention these things? Can't you make some normal demands? For example, good wine and meat. Then there should be good wine and meat, right? Xiongzhan lowered his demands again. He thought that if they didn't have this, he would just go back and stay for the night. That's possible. Yang Sen sighed. Originally, he still wanted to form a good relationship with these two people and find an opportunity to fish out some information in the future. For the time being, he gave up on this idea. After asking someone to take the two away, Yang Sen thought for a moment, then made a phone call and waited in the office. In the evening, a car stopped in front of the Messier 87. 3 people got out, 2 men and a woman. One of the men had a square face and was tall. He was dressed in a tang suit and looked quite dignified. The other man, on the other hand, was the complete opposite. He was thin with a protruding mouth and monkey cheeks. No matter how you looked at him, he looked more like a monkey than a human. However, he had a vigorous aura about him and his eyes shone brightly. The woman's appearance was average. Her chin was slightly raised and she seemed very arrogant. The 3 of them were led to Yang Sen's office by the staff. Minister Yang. The 3 of them stood at attention and raised their hands in a military salute. Baiyuha Lei Gong Zhaoyu. Yang Sen smiled and called out their names one by one. He was very familiar with these 3 people. In particular, Baiyuha had trained hard for many years and found a way to break through the limit to reach the level of those masters in history. Unfortunately, he had already provided the secret manuals to the nation, and a group of people had already reached the manual level. Then he, a genius, almost ended up like Wang Chongyang. He had just come out of seclusion and shouted, "I'm the best in the world," before being smashed to death by a flying shoe. Although he wasn't smashed to death, he wasn't much better off. He had spent so much energy thinking that he had become the best in the world. In the end, he realized that the streets were full of people with the same level of strength, and he almost went back to farming. Later on, he was taken away by the state. After all, he was the only one who studied the ancient books and deduced a way to break through the limit. In terms of talent, he could already be considered a genius. After coming into contact with the secret manuals, he lived up to his expectations. In a short period of time, his strength was once again increased by a notch and he deduced many things from the secret manuals. Now he was already the best among that batch of practitioners. As for the other 2, they weren't even 30 years old yet. Their strength was even more outstanding and they were also highly valued candidates. I don't know if the higher-ups have explained it to you. Let me explain it to you again. Take a seat first. Didn't you guys always want to see experts who are more powerful than you? This time you have a chance. Yang Sen's words made the eyes of the 3 of them light up. But don't provoke them, Yang Sen quickly said. How could that be? Lin Yu's eyes turned as she smiled. Who exactly are they? They are actually more powerful than Big Head Bai. I want to see. Yuha wasn't angry when he was called Big Head Bai. His face was calm as he waited for Yang Sen's reply. They come from the same source as your secret manuals. They come from a secret place. Yang Sen warned, don't provoke them. You guys aren't on the same level as them. Furthermore, they are very murderous and have a special status. If you guys have a conflict with them, it will be very difficult for me to protect you. It's not that I can't protect you, but it's too late. Based on my observation, they are different from you guys. They don't have many restrictions and have a lawless temperament. Before I want to protect you guys will die. So powerful? Yuha was astonished. More powerful than you think. Do you remember how the levels are divided? Man wheel, earth wheel, and spirit wheel. This is how they divide them. The secret manuals that you guys have learned are also divided like this. According to the division, you guys are all man wheel experts and these two are earth wheel experts. Are there really earth wheel experts? Yuha looked solemn. Otherwise, where did those secret manuals come from? Yang Sen asked. Seeing that they were about to ask, he waved his hand and said, don't ask too much. When the opportunity is right in the future, you guys will know. Remember, everything related to them is confidential. In the future, besides reporting to me and Lieutenant General Shining, you guys are not allowed to divulge anything. Otherwise, you will be punished according to the crime of divulging important national secrets. The three of them were awed after hearing this. Yang Sen then took out 3 books and handed them over. These are the things that you need to take note of for this mission. Go back and take a look. Now, I will bring you guys to meet these people. The 3 of them looked at each other with excitement in their eyes. Remember, don't provoke them. Yang Sen warned again. Among the 3 of them, Yuha was fine, but Lei Gong and Zhao Yu were troublemakers in the base. It was fine to cause trouble in the base, but if they were to look for trouble now, they would die. Yang Sen brought the 3 of them to a room in the building. After pushing open the door, they saw that the room was filled with wine bottles and a roasted suckling pig that had already been eaten clean. Sitting in the room were 2 huge, ferocious-looking men who were playing a finger-guessing game. Little bee. Fly among the flowers. Fly. Fly. Boom. One of them slapped out like lightning and the other person smashed through the wall and crashed into another room. Then that person ran back to shake off the dust on his body as if nothing had happened. The 2 of them continued, Little bee. Fly among the flowers. Fly. Boom. This time the other person was sent flying. This time he flew even further away. The sound of the slap on the face was simply painful. The 4 people at the door stood there with an embarrassed look on their faces. Looking at the walls on both sides, they had long been removed. The walls of the rooms next to each other had also been removed. At a glance, they could see 3 or 4 rooms. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.